conducting this meeting on Zoom as a result of the Omicron surge and the pandemic rules, just to ensure safe distancing and a safe meeting. So welcome everybody. I'd like to note that we have everybody, no, we are missing a couple of elected members. We're missing Councillor Coates, Councillor Dutta, I think there's Councillor Dutta, and Councillor Fox. And I think that's everyone, otherwise everyone else is present. If we could, are there any apologies at all, registered apologies?
No, Lord Mayor.
Okay. So Councillor Coates has joined us. So there's no registered apologies. Can I just ask also that just for the management of the meeting, if you could use the raised hand function, which is in your reactions button, and that way I can see who has raised their hand and in which order those hands have been raised, and that will just help me manage the speaking order. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Muwanina people, and also acknowledge the contemporary Aboriginal community, the Palawa people of Tasmania, who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their culture and their rights. We have the minutes of our last meeting, which was the 16th of December, and also our special meeting on the 20th of January. Would someone like to move those? Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by, need a seconder, Councillor Sherlock. If there's no dissent to those minutes, I see no dissent, so I will call that as carried unanimously. Are there any transfer of agenda items that anyone would like to move in the open or the closed? There being none, I'll move on now. Communications from the Chair. Yes, I do have two communications. The first one is just to alert the Chamber to as part of my role as Lord Mayor and the duties set out in the Local Government Act, I have produced my 2020-2021 annual report. It does outline the work that's carried out by me in my capacity as Lord Mayor to meet the 8 specific functions and duties as set out under the Tasmanian Local Government Act. The report is on the website, and I will table it, and a couple of notable items to highlight are that the office received over 1,000 individual items of correspondence that were managed or referred to parts of the organisation or other organisations outside the council. The Lord Mayor's office hosted 11 community receptions and provided 63 speeches at different events. Also attended over 500 meetings with organisations, businesses and government agencies and politicians, and that includes attending 43 intergovernmental forums, and 24 meetings were held with state and federal government representatives. So the report, as I said, is available on the council website, and I'd also like to thank all of the elected members, the deputised in the Lord Mayor's role for various events or functions, and a particular call out to the Deputy Lord Mayor, who also acted in the role a number of times during the year. I'd also like to, as a separate item, welcome Katie Cooper, who is the new Director of City Futures. It is Katie's first day in the role today, so I'm pleased to welcome her, who has joined the City's executive leadership team. Katie will provide a vital role to help shape and transform the city, the storytelling and the innovative plans that define our city as an ideal place to work and live and play and invest. Katie will be leading the functional areas of strategic planning, city mobility, the design lab, the welcome pad for the business community, and also the creative city functions of the organisation. So a big welcome to Katie. Thank you for joining us. So now moving on to notification of council workshops. We haven't had one since in the period, so there's nothing to report there. Public question time. I think we've received notice of 2 questions. So I will ask the officers to bring on the first question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And it's my role tonight to read out a question on behalf of Mr. Ben Lohberger, who was unable to join us virtually. So we will ask the question on his behalf, Lord Mayor. The question is, can the Hobart City Council please release the confidential 2-page briefing note about UTAS that it has sent to all aldermen and councillors, which reveals the council is keen to collaborate with UTAS on its proposal to redevelop the Sandy Bay campus? Can the council please explain how it can secretly collaborate with a property developer while also operating as the planning authority that will shortly be considering planning applications from the same property developer? And a number of aldermen councillors have a current financial association with UTAS or a historical financial association during the past decade. Can those elected members please reveal their current and or historical financial links to UTAS and clarify whether they will exclude themselves from deliberations on UTAS proposals? Over to you, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for that, CEO. I think as we received that just within a fairly recent time, we will be taking that one on notice and provide Mr. Lohberger with a written response, and the response will also be published on the next agenda, I think the next agenda, next meeting, council meeting agenda.
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
So do we have another question from Mr. Brian Kaur? Or is he not attending either? Maybe.
Lord Mayor, my understanding was that he was attending, but I might just check that with Mr. Jackson. Thank you.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I've just let Mr. Kaur into the meeting.
Mr. Kaur, your question? You'll need to come off mute, Mr. Kaur.
Thank you. My question relates to the elected members' expense report, November 2020 to October 21. And in particular, 2 payments for fuel expenses in April 2021. Alderman Barakis was a total of $497.51 excluding GST, which is $547.62 including GST, and Councillor Coates was $410.60 excluding and $451.66 including GST. Now, both elected members were on leave of absence during the claim period, April 2021, being candidates in the state election. Alderman Barakis claimed an average of $151.69, including GST, across the other 11 months of the year. So $547.62 is a major increase. It's about 3.6 times the average while on leave of absence. Councillor Coates claimed an average of $152.66, including GST, across the other 11 months of the year. So $451.66 is also a major increase. That's about 3 times the average, also while on leave of absence. A rough guess is that Alderman Barakis would have travelled about 3,000 kilometres, Councillor Coates about 2.5. That's based on $1.40 per litre and 8 kilometres per litre. Now, I understand that elected members have a generous petrol allowance and that there is no separate allowance for depreciation, insurance, servicing, tyres and all of that. But in my opinion, these claims for a period when you're on leave of absence don't pass the pub test. So my question is in 2 parts. Why were these claims accepted and paid, given that they cover a period when Alderman Barakis and Councillor Coates were on leave of absence, candidates in the state election? And may I please have a copy of the petrol station receipts involved?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kaur. I am going to take your question on notice and provide you with a written response in due course, and that will also be published on our council agenda. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to item 6 is petitions. Are there any petitions, CEO?
No, Lord Mayor.
Supplementary items. Are there any supplementary items for the open meeting? I don't think there are.
No, Lord Mayor.
Okay, item 8 is indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest and conflicts of interest. Would any elected members like to declare if they have any conflicts for any of the open items? There being none, we will now move on to the City Planning Committee. I note that we are now acting as the planning authority, and I'll invite Deputy Lord Mayor to outline item 9.1, which is Unit 1, number 14, Lord Street, Unit 2, number 14, Lord Street, number 2, 14 Lord Street, and number 12, Lord Street. Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And Lord Mayor, the Planning Committee didn't come to a decision, so we had a tied vote when we discussed this last Monday. So I'll move the original officer recommendation and talk to that. So I'll move that for approval.
Second, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis.
Lord Mayor, this is planning approval, and it's quite confusing because it's on a number of titles and a shared right of way which nobody owns. But essentially, there are alteration, partial demolition, alterations, extension, and 2 multiple dwellings at 214 Lord Street and 12 Lord Street. The proposal includes demolition of the existing dwelling and carport at the rear of the site to build instead of a 1-storey apartment, it would be a 2-storey single bedroom apartment. There'd be a construction of a new double garage associated with the larger dwelling at the front of the site. And the proposed garage would have an area of 65 square metres and a height of 2.7 metres with a boundary parapet wall with a maximum height of 3.2 metres. There is a rooftop garden sited on that garage with vegetation on the east and west sides, which is unable to be accessed. So there's no pedestrian access, meaning that the courtyard is reduced from the distance of both adjacent neighbours. And there's a new dwelling at the rear of the site, which would have a maximum height of 5.8 metres with a ground floor area of 46.5 square metres and an upper floor area, including a void and windows of 39 square metres. So that would be a 2-storey dwelling with living areas on the ground floor and 1 bedroom on the upper level. And there's 1 car parking space allocated in the new dwelling. There were a number of representations concerned about this, and I know that a lot of elected members have been to see it from neighbours' perspective. So there were 6 representations, 5 objecting and 1 in support. This is quite an intensive development of the rear of a Lord Street property, and there is very little private open space as part of this. Having said that, there is significant courtyard for the extension of the house and two essential outdoor areas for the apartment at the back. So there are a number of performance criteria invoked, and these on the face of it are suitable for approval, albeit with those concerns, or certainly my concerns in relation to that bulk with little private open space. Having said that, I think the conditions that have been listed as part of this are acceptable with opaque windows and a reduction overlooking. I might add, when I spoke to Mazabi today, that there is an extra condition that we did talk about at the planning meeting, which is suggested that the additional condition PLN S2, the doors between the dwelling on lot 2 and the private open space for that dwelling must be sliding doors, just to ensure that the private open space is maximised. So I don't know if I can move that as part of this my motion, Lord Mayor, but if not, I suggest that somebody might add that condition as an amendment.
I'm happy to do that, Lord Mayor. I think you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. So that's moved by Councillor Sherlock. You need a seconder for the amendment, Councillor Fox. Okay, we'll put that amendment once we're getting to the stage of voting on the item. So any further discussion on this item? If you raise your hand. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I guess I'll give a quick summary for those that weren't in the planning committee meeting. Obviously, as the Deputy Mayor, as Chair, introducing item, she spoke. It's one that's come before us without a recommendation. It was a split vote. What we did hear from the parties in the committee meeting, and it was a good opportunity where they were able to present, but we had essentially a representation from a lawyer who gave us his reasoning and case as to why this didn't comply with the planning scheme. And it was, I mean, I guess you can read stuff in the report, but arguing that case, we also had a representative who had employed to serve as a professional planner, who also presented us with a report outlining reasons as to why this didn't comply with the planning scheme. So look, it is a difficult one. I know that many of us have taken the opportunity to go down and have a look. Ultimately, it was one where our officers had done an assessment of the application and they thought it complied. We also received professional planning report that one of the neighbours had gone and sought, and we also had a lawyer present to us at the committee outlining concerns as to why. So look, with that in mind, when this came up at the committee stage, I voted against the officer's recommendation, but keeping in mind that was with, as I said, evidence that was provided to the committee. So look, I'm not necessarily here to argue either side of the case. I'm just sort of outlining the information that we as a committee were able to obtain and the representations that we were provided with. Look, I mean, ultimately, I guess it's difficult because in this form, we don't have the applicants and we don't have the response in front of us. But the reason as to why the committee was split, in my view, ultimately is because, if you like, we had professional sets of documentation put in front of us, but they didn't necessarily meet. So, look, I will foreshadow that I'll be voting against the recommendation that the Deputy Mayor has voted, but those are the reasons why. It was the evidence that was provided to us in the committee.
Further discussion? Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We did have this was quite an interesting and fulsome debate in committee last week, and we did hear a number of concerns, and there was a number of concerns that were raised that were valid, and some of the concerned neighbours do have some valid points, and I think a lot of those were covered in conditions and were covered in the planning criteria. There were issues about the open space and the privacy of that. And there were issues about the driveway access, but the reality is, like, for example, the driveway access compared to what is currently there, what's being proposed would actually have a lower potential impact on the driveway than what is currently there. So there were a number of issues to work through, and as a committee, we did work through them. There were also some suggestions made that applications weren't filed properly and declarations were made falsely. And I think, you know, that's I don't think it's even for us to really get into. That's a legal matter, not a planning matter. We're here to simply assess whether or not this is in line with the planning scheme and the regulations in it, and whether or not it's in keeping with the area. And whilst I agree with the Deputy Lord Mayor, it is an intensive development for the site. I don't think it's so much so that it is outside of the area, and it is an area that I'm quite familiar with. I used to live not far away from it. I'm very familiar with the street, and I don't think that what's being proposed is quite so intensive and quite so high of an impact that it will spoil the nature of the area. So look, I'm happy to support the motion to approve, and I'm happy to support the amendments that were suggested by the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I somehow have lost my ability to put up my flag in the electronic sense. Anyway, look, I'll be supporting if it gets to that, the foreshadowed motion by Councillor Coates. And in summary, it is a gross overdevelopment or intensification of resulting in 3 distinct and separate uses. And within a fairly small area. There's a loss of amenity, overlooking, and mass and scale issues in an outstanding heritage area. It overlooks a primary residence, outside recreational and garden area, and swimming pool of a neighbour. And there are some issues to do with traffic, irrespective that probably the traffic issue exists at the moment. It's still, we may make it worse. So I'll be supporting the foreshadowed motion if it gets to there. Thank you.
Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to endorse the points made by Councillor, Alderman Jeff Briscoe, with regards to the points he has made. I am of the view that as the committee was presented with alternative facts and evidence, and therefore we are then given the opportunity to interpret and make a decision. However, I want to refer to one particular point, which is also of concern, and that is clause E673. Now, E673A1 states that it requires a passing bay for the driveway because the driveway is longer than 30 meters. Now, this is an acceptable solution, and it does not comply, and therefore it fails. Hence, we move this, as we do, to the performance criteria, and E763P1 states very clearly that vehicular passing areas must be, and for me, this is an operative term, it must be, which is mandatory. It must provide sufficient number, dimension, and sitting so that the access is safe, sufficient, and convenient. Having read the evidence and visited the sites, I'm of the view that when we take into consideration all the 4 elements, A to D, and it says that all of these elements must be taken into consideration when you're looking at safety, efficiency, and convenience, there will be, in my view, a conflict between the users. Furthermore, I also see that there will be a problem of ease of accessibility by the users. And so therefore it does not satisfy all the 4 elements. I draw your attention to page 32 of the city planning meeting, attachment A, and point 6.10.5. And the quotation is, and I quote, Council's development engineering officers concluded that parking and access will likely be improved. Now, again, the operative word here is likely, which to me suggests that there is a probability. Now, because there is a probability, there is a likelihood. If there was a word used by them that it is a possibility, that means it can happen. Now, there is a lighter, in my view, in my interpretation, that the recommendation is not as strong as it should be. Therefore, it is my view that it is more likely that the parking and access will not be improved, but it will cause an impediment. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Would you like to sum up, Deputy?
Do you want to put that amendment first, Lord Mayor?
Sure. So the amendment was the sliding door, moved by Councillor Sherlock, seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour say aye. Oh, sorry. Anyone against, raise your hand. That amendment. One against is Alderman Briscoe, against the amendment. So we'll now move on to the substantive as, so that's carried, sorry, the amendment's been carried. So as amended, Deputy, would you like to sum up?
Yes, thank you. It's just, I suppose there's a couple of questions just to in answer to some of the things that were raised, if I might ask Ms. Aby. But and it was quite confusing with these different titles. But how many distinct residences are there currently compared to now? You know, if this were passed, so is there an intensification as such?
Ms. Aby, are you able to respond?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right there, Ms. Aby?
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to answer. So one dwelling is being demolished and another one being rebuilt. So it's essentially no change from the existing intensification of the site.
My second question is overlooking addressed with the opaqueness of windows and so forth?
Yes, it is. There are opaque windows on the top floor of the second dwelling. So both looking onto both adjacent properties, there will be opaque glass. There's also a screen and some areas which aren't accessible for the rooftop garden on top of the garage, which is expected to address overlooking for number 16 Lord Street.
Thank you. And finally, the driveway passing bay, which Councillor Dutta has raised, your officer's interpretation was different from that interpretation of their planner and what Councillor Dutta has provided?
Yes, that is the case, Deputy. The suggestion that the performance criteria requires at least one vehicle passing area is not supported by either at officer level from the development engineers and also the legal advice from Ms. Turner. It's our view that there are circumstances allowable under the planning scheme where no vehicle passing areas are provided, and the assessment by the senior development engineer is that this is one circumstance where that would be appropriate. Thank you.
And just in summary, Lord Mayor, I think those points, the amelioration of some of those concerns of neighbours and their genuine concerns, I think makes this worth supporting. It's an upgrade of some pretty ordinary housing stock at the second or the unit upgrade. So in essence, I feel that this is worth supporting.
Okay, so I'm going to put that now. I'm going to start by going around and asking how you vote, because I think there will be a split vote on this one. Deputy Lord Mayor, how do you vote?
For Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zuko.
For Lord Mayor, I'm just unmuted.
Alderman Briscoe.
Against.
Alderman Sexton.
Against.
Alderman Thomas.
Against.
Alderman Harvey. Councillor Harvey.
In favour.
Alderman Barakas.
All on, Mayor.
Councillor Dutta.
Against.
Councillor Fox.
For.
Councillor Sherlock.
For.
Councillor Coates.
Against, Lord Mayor.
And I'll vote against. So someone counting those? I think that's split.
Through you, Lord Mayor, yes, 6 votes all, Lord Mayor, so the motion's lost.
Okay, so moving on now to, so we've got the foreshadowed motion, sorry. So Councillor Coates, would you like to put your foreshadowed motion?
Sure. I guess just as per the what was it, the planning committee.
Sorry, what was that again, please?
I think you'll need to read that out, Councillor Coates, or ask Mr. Noy or someone.
Mr. Noy, do you have the reasons for refusal handy just up on my laptop here, as per for the from the committee meeting? Otherwise, I can get them.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, no, I don't have those in front of me, but maybe Ms Cornish might have them.
Sorry, Councillor Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, I thought that the vote was 7 votes to 5. Have I? Could we have that vote again, please?
No, I think it's 6 all. I'll just check that my records are corroborated by Mr. Jackson.
6 all.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I had those voting in favour were the Deputy Lord Mayor, Alderman Zuko, Councillor Harvey, Alderman Barakas, Councillor Fox, Councillor Sherlock, and those against were Alderman Briscoe, Alderman Sexton, Alderman Thomas, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Coates, and the Lord Mayor.
My apologies.
Councillor Coates, your foreshadowed motion.
I might be able to assist, Lord Mayor.
Yes. And would you like to second it, Alderman Briscoe?
Yes, I will. Now,
Okay.
I think I moved the motion for refusal in committee, so I've got my notes here. Now, obviously, the director may clean them up a little bit, but the reasons for refusal is according to 11.4.3 Part 1B, 1 and 2C, and Part 2B, failure for sorry, I haven't got full words there, but it's 11.4.3 B, and then E67 Part 3 and E673 Part 1. That may help as the reasons for refusal. As I said, I haven't got it complete here in front of me. That was just the notes I took.
Sure.
I'm sure the Mr. Neil, Mr. Noy could sort that out.
Mr. Noy?
Yes, sorry, I do have them in front of me now, so I can read it out. If
thank you.
Pursuant to the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme 2015, the Council refused the application for partial demolition, alterations, extensions, and 2 multiple dwellings at 114 Lord Street, 214 Lord Street, and 12 Lord Street, Sandy Bay, for the following reasons. The proposal does not, the proposal does not meet the acceptable solutions or the performance criteria with respect to clause 11.4.3 P1B or C, because the proposal for the new dwelling has insufficient private open space and insufficient space for gardens and landscaping. 2, the proposal does not meet the acceptable solutions or the performance criteria with respect to clause 11.4.3 P2B, because the private open space will not receive any or sufficient sunlight. And 3, the proposal does not meet the acceptable solution or the performance criteria with respect to E6.7.3 P1 because no vehicle passing area is proposed but is required in the circumstances.
Okay, thank you for that. If you're able to stop sharing that now, that'd be great. So I think we're all clear on the motion, moved by Councillor Coates, seconded by Councillor Briscoe. Is there any discussion on the motion? No discussion. I will go around and see how you vote on that. Deputy Lord Mayor?
Against.
Alderman Zuko?
Against, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Briscoe?
For the motion.
Alderman Sexton?
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas?
For.
Councillor Harvey?
Against.
Alderman Barakis?
Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Dutta?
For.
Councillor Fox?
Against.
Councillor Sherlock?
Against.
Councillor Coates?
For, Lord Mayor.
And I'll be for it as well. So that's tied again. So now I understand that that will need to then revert to the officers to make a determination because council isn't able to reach a decision. CEO, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, that's correct. And I understand that our Director of Planning has that delegation, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Question in regards to that, Lord Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sure.
Given I think obviously nothing was voted on this Ghost Officer delegation, would the officers be considering the condition that was discussed earlier? Because I think that was a suggestion from the officers as well. So would that be included if that's the outcome here?
I think yes. I'll ask Mr. Noy to confirm that that's part of that motion.
Look, as the CEO rightly pointed out, I'll use my delegation and take into account that matter in doing so, Lord Mayor.
Okay, well, we'll now move on to item 9.2, which is Clare Street in Newtown. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is partial demolition, alterations and extension to the change rooms at the Clare Street Oval. I'll move that.
Seconded by Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, this is one of the many upgrades that we're doing around the city, or this the developer is council as the applicant, and it's essentially the demolition of the public toilet groundkeepers building on the site, alterations to the existing change room building on the site, including provision of new partitions within the toilets. So it's an upgrade. Also, the existing scorer's room at the centre of the northern side will be incorporated into a new expanded kiosk. So there were 5 representations, mainly concerned about the loss of trees and also the heritage trees, which are listed. So there's a line of radiata trees at the sort of southern aspect of this, and those will be retained. The pittosporums will be removed, and there'll be a landscape plan as well as this. So it's seemed to be a good upgrade, and I think that most of those concerns that were raised by the representatives have been addressed in this application. So moved, Lord Mayor.
Any discussion? Being no discussion, I'll see if there's anyone who'd like to vote against this. Any dissent on the motion? There's no dissent, so that's passed unanimously. Item 9.3, I think is 9.3. Yes, 30 McRobies Road, South Hobart. Deputy Lord Mayor. You'll need to go off mute, Deputy. That's been seconded.
Of course I do. So this is a proposal for an outbuilding storage shed, really to replace something that was damaged by fire previously. So
Seconded by Alderman Barakis.
So it's really getting the tip shop in South Hobart with more space. This is at the rear of the tip shop site, and it's beside the public drop-off area and would replace a previous shed that was recently destroyed by fire. I don't think there's much more to say apart from there being no representations relating to this.
Any discussion? No discussion. Is there any dissent to this motion? There being none, I'll declare that passed unanimously. Item 10 is monthly building statistics. Deputy Lord Mayor.
So I'll move these, Lord Mayor, and just to say that there's certainly quite a buoyant reflection in these figures if we compare it from the 12 months previously. So moved.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okay. Item 12 is a motion from Alderman Briscoe and Alderman Zuko.
Probably item 11 first, the monthly planning stats.
Oh, didn't I do that? Sorry. Item 11, monthly planning statistics. Sorry.
Move that, and again, it reflects pretty much the buoyancy of the market at the moment.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Any dissent? There being no dissent, that's passed unanimously. Okay, we now move on to motions from elected members. This is item 12, and I'll pass over to Alderman Briscoe and Alderman Zuko.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Alderman Zuko is going to introduce the motion, and I'll be seconding it.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Sorry, and Alderman Zuko, we I think the motion in front of us is not the current one, is it?
No, I did send no. The motion that's on the books is not. The motion that will be presented tonight is one that was sent at about 4:30ish or so today. It was sent out to all elected members. We have got it here to be put up if Craig wants to put it up.
Yeah, we might do that first if you don't mind, Alderman Zuko, just so it's in front of us.
Not a problem. Right, Lord Mayor, it's the revised motion, right? And it was the one that was sent by Mr. Jackson late this afternoon. There was probably elected members might have received 3 or 4 different motions through the day, and that is due to a number of people sort of calling and seeking some amendments or changes to what was provided, and also my discussions with different people. So if you know, some elected members may have got three emails, I apologise, but all I was doing, or Alderman Briscoe and myself were doing, was listening to feedback and endeavouring to add or take away some changes. The original motion, Lord Mayor, was to immediately suspend the e-scooter scooters and go down the track of a consultation process in particular, in which I want to just point out, Lord Mayor, that is one thing the Hobart City Council didn't do in respect of its community engagement policy and community engagement framework when we approved this in last year. I voted against it, and I believe there were other people that had concerns and would have, or maybe others that may have voted against it if they were there. But Lord Mayor, I didn't make any noise at that meeting. I sat back and I was asked a question after that meeting by a number of elected members why I voted against it, and I made it very, very clear that I'd done a bit of research and I have travelled and witnessed some of the issues in regards to the e-scooters, and I don't believe the council did its homework. I want to point out as well that I'm not against the e-scooters at all whatsoever. What my concerns are now and also Alderman Briscoe and maybe others, is that it didn't take me to make any noise back in December. It's taken a huge amount of our ratepayers and residents to actually contact us, and also what we've seen on Facebook and everything. Lord Mayor, I lost count of over 100 emails I've received. I probably spoke to just today 20 or 30 different people. I've had constant emails and text messages. I just received one at just after 5 o'clock this evening of people that are raising concerns in respect of the e-scooters. So hence the change of the motion, which to my point of view and to Alderman Briscoe's point of view also, Alderman Briscoe can speak on his own behalf as well, it sort of goes down the track of some of the community consultation we should have done as part of our framework and policy that this council has. Lord Mayor, the motion is basically in two parts, from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, that we're seeking either by the February 28th, 2022, or as soon as practicable, that we have consultation with a number of groups, in particular the Disabled and Senior Association, Tasmania Police, and in particular the Anti-Discrimination Commissioner on the correspondence we received. We do an audit of footpaths, and so that we can have a look at, what are the permitted zones, and I've had discussions with the providers. I believe that can be done. As part of the audit, we have an overlay in respect of scooters on footpaths. My preferred is not to have scooters on footpaths, but I'm happy to go down the track of having a look at what are the best places that scooters should and should not be used. I also believe that we need to possibly, and again, that's why the word permanently has been taken away from there, Lord Mayor, is necessary action to potentially lower the maximum speed limit on appropriate footpaths. And what we're saying there is there could be footpaths that are appropriate and some that are inappropriate to have the speed limits at 15 kilometres. And also, there is a big misconception about the state government role and the Hobart City Council role. Look, the state government and the upper house and all that introduced a series of legislative requirements for use of e-scooters. But the Hobart City Council owns the footpaths. The Hobart City Council owns the roads except Davey and Macquarie Street. And under policy and bylaws, we determine what and who uses our footpaths, in particular, if we're going down the track of allowing a private company or any company to utilise our infrastructure. And that infrastructure is the infrastructure that belongs to the ratepayers of Hobart and the residents of Hobart, Lord Mayor, those very people who have highlighted to us their concerns. In regards to point 5, Lord Mayor, about the zero tolerance policy, to my point of view, that there sends a message to those idiots. Then there are plenty of idiots, Lord Mayor, that are using them. And let's look at the scenario in respect of what my point is about who is an idiot. An idiot is not necessarily a person who is a vandal, because we have got parents who probably innocently are allowing their children to use these scooters. I've got photos, and I've seen personally young kids of around 4 and 5 holding on the cup of the scooter with a parent riding with it, both of them not wearing helmets. Now, Lord Mayor, that demonstrates to me that either 1, the parent is an idiot, or 2, we haven't, or no one has put forward to all the people about what the regulations are. Today, I received, I'd say, at least 40 photos. And I've got photos coming out of my phone in respect of the constant amount of people that breach the regulations. And to my point of view, Lord Mayor, if you have a zero tolerance policy, that will ensure that those people who want to be idiots on these scooters are advised accordingly and go down the track of immediate suspension and a 3-month suspension.
So
now,
30 seconds.
Could I have a 2-minute extension, please, Lord Mayor?
So I'll put that for a move for a 2-minute extension, seconded by, sorry, I can't see everyone. So Alderman Briscoe, all those in favour say aye. Or anyone against, sorry. Okay, 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Lord Mayor. And you know, there are people there going, well, where do we complain? I've got to say to you, Lord Mayor, I don't know where I can put a complaint in or send in a photo to say that this person's breached or whatever have you. Now, you know, it could be a 1-300 number, or could be other options that we can put forward, Lord Mayor, that that people have an opportunity of putting forward their complaints. You know, to have to go into the website of the organisation that's providing this is not the way. I believe it should be on the Hobart City Council website where people can put forward their issues and complaints. In respect of 7, that a further report be provided within 3 to 6 months, prioritised. In other words, the CEO can prioritise all those aspects there, Lord Mayor, and come back to us over a period of 3 to 6 months with what is far more important or less important. But I want to highlight this, Lord Mayor, that the issue in regards to insurance needs to be seriously clarified. As I was advised by the e-scooter operator, that a person who is under the age of 16 is covered if they have an accident. When you actually read the insurance policy, it says otherwise. So that needs to be seriously clarified. Lord Mayor, all of these things here should have been looked at prior as part of the framework that we should have gone through as part of the community. Lord Mayor, you know, I've had
30
some,
seconds. 30 seconds.
I've had some people put through that. Why don't these scooters have GoPros on them, so that way there's 180 degrees views, so they can be recorded as part of it. Lord Mayor, this is not about Marty Zuko. This is not about Jeff Briscoe. This is about the residents and in particular the senior citizens and those disabled of our community.
Thank you. I might just, before I get other contributions, I might just make sure that give 30 seconds for everyone just to read. If we could just start at the top of the motion, just so that it is, because it is divided into 2, we can't all see it on the screen. So I'm just going to allow 30 seconds of reading time so that we can all be clear on the motion. And if we've got questions.
And it's on the hub, Lord Mayor.
Maybe if we could just go down to item 7 now. Thank you. Okay, is that it for item 7, or is there more?
There's a little bit more there, Lord Mayor.
Oh wow. Okay, I think that, and if people need to refer to it again, as Alderman Briscoe said, you can read it on your email, the most recent email from Paul Jackson. Okay, so I'll open the item for discussion. I think Deputy Lord Mayor's name was up first.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and it's really just a question. Perhaps we can hear from Alderman Briscoe as co-mover, but I just wondered if we, perhaps after Alderman Briscoe has spoken, if we can have some sort of response from the CEO in relation to what has already been undertaken by the staff in relation to this trial, which is listed up here as something brand spanking new, and also how much this differs from the vast response which was part of the original motion. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, I think you might be on mute.
Oh, I might, as Alderman Briscoe is the seconder of the motion, I think he'd like to speak, and then maybe the CEO can respond to your question, Deputy.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions first, so my time shouldn't start until I answer the questions. How many scooters are on the road with this trial? I know car is not, yeah.
CEO, are you responding to questions, or is Mr. Stevenson doing that?
For you, Lord Mayor, we will tag team a little bit here. For some of those more specifics, I might ask Mr. Stevenson to respond in terms of the total number to date. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Through you, Chair. The total number of scooters is that are allowed under the contract is 300 per operator, so 600 across the city.
Thank you. And the second question is, how much anticipated revenue? And I ask this question because there are two conflicting amounts. I looked at the original City Infrastructure Committee, and I point 7.11, the estimate of the revenue to the city was to exceed 250,000. Yet the CEO, in her response to our motion, said it was 100,000. So I wonder if I could have a clarification of those two figures.
Mr. Stevenson.
Through you, Chair. The amount that the city would receive is a percentage of what the operators receive, and that is different to how it was originally conceived during the tender process. That was something that was sorted out during the contract process. So that means that the amount that the city will receive is actually unknown until we have reporting back from the operators as to their first month's income. And we can't extrapolate that from the number of rides because the rides are of different prices and the operators' costs are taken out before, some of the operators' costs are taken out before that percentage is applied. So we just don't have an exact answer. So my suspicion is that it's something between those two numbers annually, but I don't know exactly.
Thank you. So just as a comment now, and I'll start, that it find that the decision that we made that came out of the City Infrastructure Committee was 250,000, exceeding 250,000. And the answers that I've just received are a bit worrying. However, as the justification for this motion is that neither Alderman Zuko or myself are the fun police. I've used the scooters, and I don't know whether Alderman Zuko has, but I can see that there are opportunities for quite an enjoyable ride. However, having potentially 600 scooters on our roads and particularly our footpaths was a big mistake on the council's part. When the justification, and I went back to the original document, and the CEO has referred to it in her response to our motion, and it was the Connected Transport CTR10, the last mile micro mobility and data trials. And just to quote, the trial of a range of smart micro and shared mobility providers, including a small, the emphasis is small fleet of docked and parked bikes, e-bikes, e-scooters and cars within the city's off and off-street parking facilities. That's what the justification for introducing 800 scooter, potentially 600 scooters onto our roads and footpaths at the height of our tourism season. And I went looking for a report to indicate the risks, risks and an assessment of risks of introducing potentially 600 e-scooters. And we didn't find, now I know Mr. Carr is not available because he has left the organisation, perhaps he could answer it, but normal reports go through the risks, financial and risks to our council, and that hasn't been done. Neither has any consultation been done with the groups such as the groups that have been contacting us over the last couple of weeks. We have indicated, the council have indicated that we received a email communication from the Discrimination Commissioner, and that is worrying. We've received heaps of emails from people who have disabilities, who have had near misses and are frightened of using our footpaths. I know as a towards elderly person, would say I'm towards elderly person, maybe hearing is not so good, and these e-scooters can come up behind you at 15 kilometres per hour and you can't hear them. Many of our footpaths are not suitable, literally not suitable, because they are less, the width of them is not suitable. Now, I went back to the legislation and the justification of legislation, and the government threw it to us, that we have given discretionary authority to determine which of our roads and footpaths are safe to use. Nowhere have I seen in the documentation that's been provided to local councillors or the Hobart elected members indicates that they've gone through that process of every road and every footpath that these scooters are being used on. Now, I'm worried, I could go on for ages, but I think my original, and it still is my preferred thing, is that we have a full ban or pause for a month, but unfortunately, knowing some of the comments some of the elected members have made, that they won't support that. So the second best is that we have a fairly intensive audit and come back to us within a month or so to indicate which additional footpaths are not permitted. I think that's the least we can do. Also, on another matter, it's that international research on these e-scooters, both in America and US, US and Europe, and it is sort of hinted in the state government paper that sometimes the shared scooters are just transferring walking to e-scooters or cycling to e-scooters or public transport to e-scooters, and indicates the paper that I referenced in the just rationale that in fact it's actually worse for the environment. I don't know whether, because the great intention is to get cars off the road.
30 seconds, Jeff. Alderman.
Can I have an extension, thanks?
So how long would you like? 1 minute. That's moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Barakis. Any opposition to that? Okay, yes, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. Now, I could go on for a lot longer than 1 minute, but I think you get the gist of it. I think probably e-scooters and other similar devices will have an important role in cities of the future, and maybe even in Hobart. And it appears that the research indicates that privately owned e-scooters actually do have a positive effect on the environment and on movement patterns, but not these e-scooters that, as we have seen, we've all seen it, joyriding around the city, really joyriding, and as Alderman Zuko said, parents with their children double dinking and without helmets. I think it's a disgrace personally that we allowed such a huge rollout when we didn't have justification with our documents, we didn't do our risk assessments, and it is quite a profitable business that these two e-scooters have using our footpaths and endangering our residents. It appears that even if it's $10 per trip, it could be something they've earned probably over $2 million already or of revenue.
That's time, Alderman.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I might see if the CEO wants to respond to Deputy Lord Mayor's question. And the question, Deputy, was related specifically. Can you just repeat what it was that you wanted responded to?
Yes, I'd like to know through you, Lord Mayor, whether the information that's contained, or the things that have been picked up by this motion that we got about half an hour ago has been reflected in some of the answers from the original report, essentially, and how much does that differ?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for that clarification also, again, Deputy Lord Mayor. In terms of my response, it really is outlined in what was circulated previously. So given the fact that this is a trial, it is an active trial, which means that, as you will have seen from the resolution of council, that we do actually have that delegated to myself as the CEO, and that means that, you know, we are looking at those sorts of improvements all of the time, and we'll continue to do so through the life of the trial. So a number of the matters that are raised in this notice of motion are certainly consistent with that. I think we have to also just be clear that there was actually a risk assessment taken. So just, Lord Mayor, just for clarity, I understand Alderman Briscoe may not have seen that as part of an overarching council report, but there was certainly an external consultant hired by the City of Hobart some time back when the trial was first mooted, and it was an independent study that looked at the safety and other risk factors. So I'd need to take on notice, Lord Mayor, where that actually went to in terms of, you know, was it actually reported to the Finance and Governance Committee? I just need, just to clarify, we did actually have an audit undertaken some time back, as I understand it. Thank you.
So maybe Mr. Stevenson, I think I recall it being on the City Infrastructure Committee agenda, but Mr. Stevenson, can you clarify that?
Yes, it was. So the the report that went up to council in December had an attachment to it, which was an external consultant's report that included a risk assessment. It wasn't an audit of every footpath in the city, but because e-scooters have actually been legal on Tasmanian footpaths since 2009, and the city does an annual audit of footpaths for safety for all vehicles that are allowed to travel on footpaths. The existing places where footpaths are not allowed for e-scooters was considered enough to cover the conditions of the trial, notwithstanding changes that may happen during the trial.
Okay. So, Mr. Stevenson, did you mean to say e-bikes have been allowed since 2009 rather than e-scooters?
No, e-scooters have been allowed on Tasmanian footpaths since 2009. The change that happened in December 2021 was to allow them to travel on the roads. So they've been allowed on footpaths since 2009.
Okay. All right. I think I can see Alderman Councillor Dutton is first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question or two. Firstly, the first question is, could the CEO or someone advise or inform what processes and procedures were taken before the council made its decision on the 21st to approve this 11.1? Was there a workshop? Was there any other information given?
Through you, if I may, Lord Mayor, I'm happy to provide that advice further in writing to elected members. But as some of you will recall, there was actually a workshop some time ago with elected members that sort of also involved the external review that I mentioned earlier that looked at safety particularly. We also ran a joint procurement process with Launceston as part of a trial, which was announced some time back. And consultation was undertaken, albeit I do acknowledge not with those groups specifically outlined. And certainly, as you'll note from my response to the original notice of motion, that's certainly something that we'll be doing from here on in and really strengthening our approach to engagement as it relates to those key agencies and key stakeholder groups. And we see that as being a really active component of the trial moving forward. But as was mentioned earlier, the introduction of micro-mobility and these sorts of transport options was introduced as part of the Capital City Strategic Plan some years back now. But it sort of gained traction, of course, when the expression of interest or the sort of EOI went out jointly with Launceston to do the 12-month trial.
And just one further question. Did the council, again, I just need clarification. I note that you mentioned something along these lines, but just for clarification purposes, did the council delegate the operational matters pertaining to e-scooters to the CEO? And if yes, are you dealing with this? Thank you.
Through you, Lord Mayor, to Councillor Dutta, that's in fact correct. And we are dealing with matters as they're raised. And these things, you know, are evolving all of the time. And certainly from an officer perspective, we're wanting to make sure that, you know, this rollout is as successful as it can be as part of the trial, but also acknowledge those real issues that have been raised around, you know, safety, around user education, particularly as it relates to minors, protection of important heritage assets, as we've heard, in terms of inappropriate use on Kelly Steps, for instance. I mean, these are the sorts of things that we need to be dealing with quickly. So we are endeavouring to do that with the companies concerned in real time, and we'll continue to be as agile as we can in our approach. And certainly that's consistent with what's been discussed this evening to date. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Alderman Sexton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll just begin by saying that, yes, agreeing with Alderman Briscoe, there has actually been quite a lot of work done on use of e-scooters and in particular the impact on the environment. And in December 2020, there was an article published in the Journal of Transport Geography, which looked at e-scooter use in Vienna, which was one of the first cities in Europe to introduce e-scooters. And they found that most of the trips with e-scooters replaced trips that would have otherwise been taken by a more sustainable means of transport, that is walking or public transport, if the e-scooter had not been available. They also went on to say that their findings set into perspective the sustainability promises of scooter companies who promote their schemes with the argument of replacing the unsustainable use of private cars with e-scooter trips. Instead of car trips, it is mostly walking trips that are replaced, which in fact leads to higher CO2 emissions and more negative effects on the environment, etc. So I think that there is a lot of evidence coming through now, and I think most of us who have witnessed ourselves anecdotally the use of these e-scooters would agree that many of them are for fun. And I don't have any problem, like Alderman Briscoe, I don't have any problems with people using e-scooters for fun. However, what we have witnessed, and I live close to where a lot of these e-scooters are used, and I see them coming past my door through the Princess Park, down at Salamanca, etc. And I've witnessed hundreds and hundreds of them now. And I would say, guessing 20 to 30% of those would be under the age of 16, and an equal percentage would not be wearing helmets. I did inquire as to what processes were put in place to ensure compliance and how many, and I was told that underage users would be banned. And I said, how many have been banned? And I was told 26. Now, I reckon I've personally seen 200 or 300 underage riders of e-scooters. So clearly, whatever processes are in place for ensuring that underage riders don't ride e-scooters and those who do ride e-scooters wear helmets is not working. So this motion is extremely timely, and it's very important. I know some people have argued that we've got a 12-month trial, we should wait till the end of the 12-month trial and then see what happens. Well, if we do that, then based on what we've been seeing so far, almost certainly the trial will be a failure. And the only way of addressing that will be to say at the end of the trial, okay, well, we've identified all of these issues which need to be addressed, so we'll now have to have another trial to see whether they can be addressed. So it is absolutely imperative that now that we've been notified and we've seen for ourselves what is going on with these e-scooters, that the motion that's before us is supported, so that the various groups that are concerned can be heard and or reassured, or at least provided with the information about how we as a council and how we, in collaboration with the e-scooter operators, are going to be addressing their concerns, but also to answer all the various questions in part 7 that need to be answered before the end of the trial. If we can do that, then it'll be a win-win. If we don't do that, then all parties will lose, and we will knowingly have allowed this trial to fail because we have failed to act when all of these issues are drawn to our attention. And I can tell you now, for somebody who over the years has been involved in medical trials, whenever adverse effects are identified within a medical trial, they do not wait until the end of the trial period to address it if they are serious. And we should not do that either. So I will certainly be supporting this, Lord Mayor.
Okay, so Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, Lord Mayor, I think it's, I've seen firsthand the benefits of the scooters. I think they're, when they're used properly, they're a great addition to the transport solutions for the city. I've used them myself for trips that I'd otherwise be taking the car if I'm going from one part of the city to the other part of the city. And I know many people that do the same thing. But I also think that if anyone was to say that there aren't any issues, or that the issues aren't serious, or they're just, part of the bedding in process, I think are also kidding themselves. There are some serious issues. I think everybody's seen either firsthand or anecdotal, or been told anecdotally of situations where people have used the scooters inappropriately, whether it's been illegally or whether it's leaving scooters in completely inappropriate places and obstructing footpaths and whatnot. I don't think there's any real disagreement there, or I would hope not. I suppose the question is, do we halt a trial, or do we throw the baby out with the bathwater for what might otherwise be a good program? And I think the answer to that's obviously no. We have some serious issues, and I know that the CEO, and this was discussed when the motion was initially voted on last year, but I know that the CEO does have a fair bit of authority here to make changes to the trial on the fly. And as Alderman Sexton said, that is what the trial process is. There's no point in waiting till the end. And I think if we waited until the end to address the issues, then what might be a good program would completely have lost the support of the public if these issues were allowed to continue and fester. This is a dynamic trial, and we should be responding to issues as they occur. And I know the CEO has been doing that. I do also think it's important that we do send a message to the public and to the providers that the council's taking this seriously, and we do provide a tangible direction for the CEO to exercise those powers to update the rules to respond to these concerns. So look, I think we do need to be careful here. I think we do need to be careful not to be too prescriptive. But ultimately, I think this motion does put us in a good place to address some of these issues. I know I've seen down in Salamanca people dinking, people using the scooters without helmets, underage people, and what I assume is a number of people using the scooters under the influence of alcohol. Part of the issue, I think, is we have rules that exist currently, and I think a lot of those rules are good rules, but the rules aren't being enforced. I think part of that might be that the Tasmania Police needs to take a more active role in this, and when they do see that sort of behaviour, they need to address that. I think if there was some sort of blitz, or if there was some sort of crackdown on inappropriate scooter use, people might stop thinking of it as a zero consequence for doing the wrong thing kind of option. Because they are useful when they are used in the right way. And part of that is council, part of that is the scooter companies communicating these rules potentially better to the public, as well as communicating what to do if you see somebody using the scooter inappropriately or leaving the scooter in an inappropriate location that might be dangerous or might be obstructing footpaths and access ways. We've heard from groups such as disability groups that have raised concerns, and they're real concerns. So the question is, how do we bring everybody to the table? How do we look at the productive ways and the practical ways we can address this without throwing the baby out with the bathwater? So look, I think much of what this motion is, and I know it's been said, I think by the Deputy Lord Mayor, can be addressed currently under the CEO's powers. But I do also think it is important that we send or make it clear what council's position is on this. We don't want to stop the program. We shouldn't want to stop the program, but we are taking it seriously, and we are acknowledging that the trial is a dynamic trial, and we're responding accordingly. Because to not do so, or to stop the trial, I think would be detrimental. To continue the trial as is without changing any of the rules or without responding to the issues as they occur, I think would just be foolish. So I'll support this motion. I'd hope that it comes to good outcomes, and I hope that those concerned see this as a sign that the council is taking this issue seriously, and hopefully we can reach a point where people are using the scooters appropriately, and it's adding a great transport option, a mobility option for people getting around the city, and we can crack down on mitigate all the inappropriate uses and such that we saw, especially at the beginning in the end of last year.
30 seconds.
Thank you. I might suggest that I'll ask for another minute, Lord Mayor, if I could.
So that's moved by Councillor Sherlock, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. Anyone against the extra minute? No.
Thank you. Look, I might just take that last minute to just echo what Alderman Zuko said. I think this perhaps could have been a lot. There may be some issues here that perhaps could have been resolved at the outset with some better forward thinking. Perhaps it wasn't the best idea to have this put out on Cage Night, where people are the most drunk that they're probably going to be outside of New Year's Eve. And some of the misbehaviour that we saw on that night, I think definitely was a bit of a perfect storm. So I think, if we did better consultation, listen to these groups such as the disability groups at the outset, we may have been in a better place right now, but we didn't. We are here, and it's not too late to do that work now and amend this on the fly. And hopefully by the end of the trial, or even sooner than that, I'd expect within the next few weeks, we'll start seeing the changes to this program bear fruit and result in better outcomes. I think they're the important things here. I think the biggest issue is a transparent and well communicated way for those in the public that have concerns about individual cases where people have done things inappropriately to report those to BEAM or to Neuron, so that they can be addressed. So I think that will go a long way to actually helping with the enforcement and helping make sure that people are using their scooters safely. So I'll leave it there, Lord Mayor, and we'll see how the debate goes.
Thank you, Alderman Barakis. Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Look, Lord Mayor, I'm very pleased that there was no support or very little support to halt the trial. I think that's a very important outcome from this meeting. I'm also conscious that many other cities and states, well, every state in the country is going through scooter trials. New South Wales, I think, is the slowest state off the mark with these things. But every single state, cities all over the country are looking at or have introduced scooter trials or have introduced scooters, e-scooters. So it's a thing that is occurring all over the world, and Australia is no exception. So scooter trials are happening more and more. We've seen a couple of announced recently, Burnie, Devonport, Melbourne just announced that they'll be running a scooter trial in the near future. So it is a big deal. It is a thing that's happening everywhere, and everywhere I'm assuming we have the same sort of anxiety, the same sort of issues, and the same sort of processes in train, where a lot of people are concerned about what's happening with scooters like we are in Hobart. And I think there are some legitimate concerns, but I also take confidence from the fact that we've addressed things in real time, like the CEO has informed us. And when I look at the notice of motion here tonight, and I went through all the dot points, all of those dot points, all of those issues that have been identified and actions to try and remedy them have all been addressed somewhat already, and we've got data on much of that already. We've already got the first report that's come in from the vendors, or not from both vendors, about the stats and the data. And we've also got the the data from incident reports and things like that, and feedback on the pros and cons. And what I've spotted is 68% of feedback so far has been in favour of the scooters. So while we do have issues, most people really appreciate this new form of transport for Hobart, this new micro mobility. And I've made an attempt to speak to as many people as possible on the streets and get their views on scooters. And I also I know someone personally that now saves $88 a week in Uber bills, in Uber fares, because they've switched to a scooter, and they now ride their scooter to and from work, and that saves them $88 a week. $11 a trip to, $11 back, and they're a subscriber now. And I think the subscription to the e-scooter that they subscribe to is $39 a month. So it saved them a fortune. Other people I've spoken to have said the walk was a little bit too far, but with a scooter, we've made the distance much shorter and quicker. So it's really convenient. And one particular person I bumped into the other day informed me that their normal walk is 45 minutes, and it's a bit too far on some days when you're in a rush. But by scooter, they've shortened that time. So focusing on some of the positives of the scooter, of the e-scooters, I think is really important, rather than just continuing to focus on the negatives of the e-scooters all the time. And some of these negatives we can fix, and we are addressing them. And the CEO's informed us a number of times that they're working in real time to address issues. And like I said, much of what was included in this notice of motion, we already know the answer to, or we already have solutions in train. So I'm really pleased to see that already. And when I first saw the motion, I was considering whether I support it or not. But Alderman Sexton made an important point that this does reassure a lot of people that the council is paying attention and taking all these issues very seriously. So that particular sentence helped to push me across the line, and I will support the motion today, even though I understand that we are dealing with most of these things already. But I'm pleased the trial is going to continue. But a couple of comments came up about e-scooters are worse for the environment, and that might be the case where their batteries are charged with coal.
30 seconds, Alderman.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Where batteries are charged with coal energy. But Tasmania is very different because we're 100% renewable energy. So e-scooters, I would guess, are much more environmentally friendly in Tasmania than other places because we have renewable energy already. The data is really important, and into the future, I'll be making my decision based on the data that comes back to us. The scooter companies are keeping data. I'm sure the council's keeping data. So that's the way I'll be deciding my decision. And one more thing, if I could have an extension for a minute, please, Lord Mayor.
So moved by Alderman Baraka, second by Councillor Sherlock. Anyone against? No? Yes, please go ahead.
I've got a slight amendment that the movers might like to include, and that is that the council acknowledge the high user rate and the popularity of e-scooters in Hobart. And part two, that council recognises the shortage of safe, separated bike and scooter lanes and commits to accelerating development of infrastructure to create a safer environment for pedestrians, bike riders and scooter users. I think we're already in that zone, but I'd just like to test the water and see whether or not the movers would like to include that. I'll just read it again. So part one, that the council acknowledges the high user rate and popularity of e-scooters in Hobart. Part two, that council recognises the shortage of safe, separated bike and scooter lanes and commits to accelerating development of infrastructure to create a safer environment for pedestrians, bike riders and scooter users. And this is about congestion on certain footpaths. we just don't have space on some footpaths for the traffic that we're seeing. And I also would like to think that we can have safer, separated space for scooters and bikes as well, so they can avoid those congested areas where there's a lot of pedestrians. So hoping that can be included.
Time, Alderman Harvey. Alderman Zuko, are you happy to include that in?
Look, all due respect to Alderman Harvey, Councillor Harvey, I actually would support both of those things if they were on a separate motion, and I'll explain to you why on the first part. We've only been involved here in a month, so we don't know whether or not the use is going to be as high during winter. So that would be something that I'm happy to leave until such time the CEO can give us, because I'm not quite convinced yet of the high percentage of volume of use, because it's only been a month and through the busiest period. So that's the reason why I'm not accepting that. As far as the bikeways, I've supported most bikeways across the city. I'm happy to support that if Alderman Harvey brings that separately as a motion.
So, Councillor Harvey, do you want to move that as a foreshadowed?
Yes, I will.
Or an amendment, sorry.
No, I'll move it as a foreshadowed motion after we've settled the motion on the books here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you.
So now, Alderman Barakis, do you want to pop your hand down, or have you got that up for something else? Alderman Thomas? Alderman Thomas?
Yeah, thanks very much. First of all, I think it's important that we understand that as a council, our first meeting back, we've really been hit with a fairly big minefield. We're in uncharted waters to a reasonable degree here. And I think it's only fair to say that there was an opportunity, surely, by these operators to have, who have had these trials in place elsewhere, to have had the prior experience in respect to the underage riders, in respect to the helmets, in respect to a range of matters, which in particular the parking of these scooters, which is radically improved from earlier days. I can remember watching Councillor Harvey do his first media on this from outside the town hall, and I thought, my golly, there's going to be some issues here, which has proven to be the case. But I think, having said that, and I think the first education could have come from the operators themselves, who obviously had the information at hand. I'd like to do two things. First of all, I'd like to commend the movers of this motion. I think you've brought to us early an issue which the silent majority might have hung us on over time. So the fact that you've actually taken the time, and I believe you have listened to a large degree to a number of people, has led to tonight's revised motion, which is not to strike the scooters out of the city at this point. The second thing I think it's important is to commend the actual operators. It's fine to say, for me to have made that first remark, and I stand by it, but the operators, whether it's on one of our Facebooks or whether it's to the council in various meetings that the operators were prepared to have, they've actually responded to our concerns quickly and promptly, and a number of activities, particularly the parking of these scooters, has, as I said, improved out of space. There's certainly, to my mind, a desire that all the councillors get a tannoy put onto their cars as we drive past these ones without a helmet and say, for heaven's sakes, put your helmet on, it's causing us all a great deal of problem. But leaving that type of comment aside, some days ago, I put up a Facebook on the e-scooters, which is a big thing for me because I don't actually use Facebook very much in a political sense. And I actually have a very eclectic membership on my Facebook because occasionally I'm reasonably careful who goes on it or who I accept, but occasionally I'll open it up and have a day of reckoning. And so I've got a very diverse group there. And I'd say that 70% of a large number of people from all around the globe that are on Facebook, into my Facebook, have been supportive, overwhelmingly supportive of the continuation of the trial. Let me say that 30% of that 100, so 30 people that have been opposed, have been really opposed. We're not talking about, we're not sure we want them. They're saying, get these things off our streets. So I think it's very timely that we're in a position now to say, go ahead, but we're in the firing line as well, operators. So we need to understand what is happening on the streets. I think we need to see the operators in their orange and blue sweatshirts out more often. You might have a number of people out in the streets, and I think it's fantastic. There's a new growth industry and employment here, but visual observance and visual regulation is going to make a huge difference here. I think if we look at the two things that are important, I think the members of the public that are, as I said, at least 70, perhaps more percentage overwhelmingly supportive of the trial, they need to see evidence of education happening. Now, whether or not it's at certain busy spots where you've got a beam or a neuron person there offering some guidance, or in a more formal setting, that education has to be promoted and it has to be advertised so people know it's there, whether it's in, and I know this is happening, but sell the message as operators. And this, as I say, the second thing is, I think it's important that this is a trial in Hobart. The trial is happening elsewhere, and in areas such as Queensland Health, there have been issues that have raised. We can get this right. As I say, I commend the movers of the motion, but I particularly thank the companies for having got off their backside and responded. They could have sat back and said, we've got to deal with the council. We'll sit back for 3 to 6 months, but they're not saying that. They're saying, bring us the problems. And I think this council is saying, don't just take on our problems, actually get out there yourself and educate. So I think they're fabulous in the right zone or in the right use, and I'm supportive, but I think we need to, as I say, upgrade the education and upgrade the visual presence of the operators at busy points where these things are hired. Thank you.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I won't go over the same sort of ground, but I'd just like to make a couple of points. So I think the movers have brought these specific issues that they've been hearing from the general public and seeing, as we all have. Having said that, there are some real benefits to this trial, and I would hate to see a trial falter before we actually oh, sorry, that's my dog. Before we actually really get some detailed data and information in relation to this. The beauty of this e-scooter trial is that it's in our city, across the city, not just in the central business district. And already there were areas, geo-fenced areas, where scooters couldn't go. They are, as part of this iterative process, altering. So we're seeing the responsiveness that we can get with this kind of modality. Just in relation to many of the concerns that have been raised in relation to injury or perceived injury and anecdotal injury, whilst we have had examples of injury and no injury is good, I did contact Dr. Juan Carlos Ascension Lane, who is the chair of the Tasmanian chapter of the Australasian College of Emergency Medicine. And whilst there aren't any hard and fast statistics from the emergency department, what he's saying that his members are seeing is not the large amount of injury and clogging up of the system, which unfortunately some people who have contacted me have been extremely hyperbolic in their assessment of how bad this is. So quite often when we get change occurring or any sort of disruption, we can get a lot of fear associated with it, and sometimes that's guaranteed, or that's really quite necessary or justified. but it's not always the case. So in some situations, I think those facts are probably something that we should be looking at. And I'll also make just the point that Dr. Ascension Lane did also make the point that there have been data coming back from trials. There was a trial in Auckland where speed, not wearing helmets, and also alcohol-related injuries were the reasons for 26% of the injuries. So they didn't have to wear helmets. We have to wear helmets. It's illegal to ride them without helmets. It's illegal to go fast in particular areas. It's certainly illegal to be intoxicated. And I think we need to continue to get that message out because this isn't really all on the shoulders of the Hobart City Council. This is about personal responsibility as well. So I'd like to just finish by saying that I think if we are working with the real intention of making this trial work and to responding, rather than try to cut it at its knees, then I think that's a good thing. I wouldn't want to see the elected members micromanaging, and I think we need to be really careful of what is operational and what is our responsibility. So with those thoughts in mind, I think this does respond to some of those concerns that have been raised.
Thank you. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, just very quickly, I don't want to cover ground that's been covered by others, so I won't sort of speak directly to the instances we've seen. But look, I just want to make the point that, and I want to thank the mover and the seconder of the motion. I was one of those ones that gave feedback and said, look, I don't think it's appropriate that we do a pause. And look, they did take that on board. From my point of view, if we enter into a trial and we go and seek partners, we've got to be honest and upfront about it. And, and I think it did increase a level of risk. Who else would then partner with us in the future? But I think they have highlighted some issues. Look, I think ultimately what the compromise that they've come to has been a very big move on their part. But I think we have learnt a lot, and even in the last best part of 6 weeks since going live, there's been significant changes, and I think there's been a lot of goodwill on behalf of the officers of Hobart City Council to actually make changes and amendments. And from my point of view, just putting a governance hat on, that's very good. I'm not seeing council officers who aren't responding to community concerns, and I'm definitely not seeing the operators of these scooters, the two companies, not taking actions and changes. Obviously, they've got some learning and they've made some changes, and perhaps there were some mistakes made in the launch. But I think by and by, we've seen a huge amount of changes to ultimately tweak and make it work for our city. Every city is a little bit different. Hobart's got a unique geography, but look, at the end of the day, it's a trial, and it's in these operators' interest to do the right thing and be good corporate citizens, because at the end of it, we're going to be asked a decision as to whether we want this permanently for our city. But look, I think that ultimately the movers of this motion, the second of this motion, I think have done the right thing. And look, I applaud them for making that change.
I think that's all. I don't have any other hands up. Does anyone else want to make a contribution? Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to address a few points in here. Firstly, to endorse the fact that there are problems and there are serious issues. And it is undeniable that these evidence we all have witnessed and seen. And I won't go through the list, but it's already been made. Just to add a personal experience, that I have a shop in South Hobart, and we have so many of them who are vulnerable, frail, and in fact, customers are disabled as well. I have a number of couples who come in, they're blind or partially blind. There has been an occasion where I was just about hit at my shop and also a few other places. So I don't deny that. It is an undeniable fact and evidence that it's there. It's deplorable and they are unacceptable behavior by those who breach these rules. But it's not the scooter itself. The scooter is fine. I think it's the people who in fact misuse and abuse that. That's an important point for me to remember. Secondly, I'm also glad that the pause motion has been taken away, because that would not have gained ground in the context of our legal agreement, I understand, because we could have then been asking questions of legal implications in this. What I am worried about and concerned, it appears that the decision made by council has been poor decisions on a number of occasions. One, this matter came and challenged with regards to taste, with parking meters, and now this one here. It appears that we don't do our work properly, and it's time that we became more to scrutinize much better. Instead of every few weeks we come back and we say we make the wrong decision. So for me, it is an important point to remember. Thirdly, it is also my point of view that we have already delegated the powers to the CEO, and we've got to understand that there are so many points in here that speaks not of policy, which is our jurisdiction and role, but they are also operational matters. And so I'm so glad to know that the CEO is already making changes and implementing constantly and continually as this matters come to face to address. And therefore, I think it is a pragmatic solution to go down this path. However, I would have gone to a committee to discuss this in a much detailed way instead of spending our time in here. However, I will support this because of the dangers involved. Thank you.
Any further discussion? No further discussion. I might have a few comments to make, but also I've got a couple of questions for the movers of the motion, just around, and also the CEO, just around the item 2, which ends with the word urgent and doesn't say what is that urgent report. So that, Alderman Zucker, that's to be brought in.
Just add the word urgent report there. That was as part of an urgent report, yes.
I just would like to seek a little bit of advice from the CEO on that item. I support the general intent, but I'm a little bit concerned about how specific that is and how practical it is. Basically, it's that an audit of all footpaths in the permitted zones be audited by the council officers in consultation with the operators. And the audit has to include consideration of the width of the footpath for safe two-way passing, the safety of the footpath surface, the gradient of the footpath, and any other factor impacting rider and pedestrian safety as part of an urgent report. Now, my understanding of what's allowed under the Tasmanian road rules is that every single footpath in Hobart would have to be audited for width and the surface. And that seems to me like maybe a 10-year job. And I'm just wondering how practical that is and how the CEO will potentially deal with that.
Through you, Lord Mayor, thank you for your question. And look, I understand the intent of what's there. I think, as you say, in terms of how we'd actually undertake that and implement it, we'd need to come back with further advice to council on that. But I do understand the intent of what's being tried to be achieved in that regard. It is likely that we'd need to undertake additional work that may involve contractors and so on, but that's certainly something that I'd need to take on notice and provide a subsequent report on that, which I would do as a general update on the other matters that have been raised as part of this proposed notice of motion amendment as well.
Okay.
May I assist a little bit, because we're the writer of the motion.
Yes, sure.
The council already does a yearly audit report of its footpaths, so we do that on a regular basis. So I would say a lot of that information is already very well documented in the sense of our footpaths, but it's only relevant to the areas of use of the e-scooters that we have to concentrate on.
I think that is, though, every footpath in Hobart, or most of them, and certainly if it comes to privately owned scooters, they are obviously allowed everywhere and have no restrictions on them at all. So, but okay, but it sounds as though the CEO will sort of give us further advice if it is a major project that would, be significant cost. We'll think about, we'll get further advice on that before that was done.
That's correct, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to do that, as you've outlined, and also just put together an implementation plan that I'd report to Council on regularly, which I outlined in my notes earlier, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas, did you have your hand up for a reason? Was that a supplementary question? You need to be off mute, Alderman Thomas. Alderman Thomas, you're on mute. I'm sorry, Alderman Thomas.
That's all right. Now, I just wanted to make a point as we're moving towards the end of the debate, Lord Mayor, and not intruding on the fact you still got some comments to make. Can I just refer to the motion? Line 3 of clause 1 has got an inaccuracy. It talks about ON instead of 1. And, if you look at line 3 of 1, it's got A and urgent. Just remove A, and in 5A, just to make sure that someone's reading this and knows we weren't on some form of juice, immediate on months, just change that to 1, please. That's in line 3 of item 1 and line 5A, just change on to 1.
Thank you.
Yes, Lord Mayor, just a couple of typos there. I tried to pick up all the typos today, kept on changing it all day. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. So just some comments from myself. I do want to just acknowledge the lengthy discussion we've had, and I think that's been really useful. I do think potentially this would have been better had we had a workshop to, perhaps refer this motion to a workshop, because some of us did receive it only a couple of hours ago, and it is quite a departure from the original motion, which is on our agenda. It doesn't bode well for good policy making to kind of be sort of randomly pulling things together. But I think what I acknowledge is that a lot of the motions and the clauses are reflecting some of the advice in the CEO's report about things that are happening, or things that the operators have undertaken to do, and or the CEO has outlined as part of the proposed response in the coming months. So in that sense, I think the motion is good, that it's reflecting back what the CEO's advice is to us about what's happening, and just saying, we agree with some of the proposed actions, and we endorse what the officers have planned, and we acknowledge the work that's happening, and we acknowledge the future work. So I think that's a positive thing. I am pleased that we are continuing with the trial, and that the motion has changed today so that the trial is continuing, and I think that's positive. I've also received a lot of comments from people. There's certainly been a big talking point in Hobart. I've received people raising concerns who don't want them at all. I've had people raising concerns who still see the positives of them. And I've also had people saying that they're concerned that we might stop the trial or we might take them away. And yeah, it is very clear that there have been tens of thousands of trips. Some, of course, are tourists and sightseeing and maybe joyriding. There are certainly some people using them as transport around the city. So there is certainly a mix. I do have a few concerns about some of those particular elements of the motion, but I just don't think this environment is the right place to kind of try and workshop and amend them. I guess one of the things is around what we can and can't do around footpaths. We do need to seek advice about whether we can, what we can do that overrides the state government's road rules. I do acknowledge that we're able to sort of pull out certain footpaths in certain locations, but that is really a major to do that across the board in all footpaths in Hobart. We would also have to address bikes and e-bikes who also are allowed to ride on our footpaths as well. I do think that we, as part of this, as part of the staff's work, we do need to ensure that we are working closely with the state government. They also have said that they are keen to tweak their road rules. And they did make the choice to allow 15 kilometres an hour on footpaths in Tasmania. And we can try and modify that for the shareable scooters because they are programmable and we are in constant contact with the companies. However, we can't necessarily do that with privately owned scooters. And I do note that some of the big problems in Brisbane now are around the privately owned scooters, which can be programmed to go 40 to 50 kilometres an hour. And I think the only death we've had in Australia was someone riding a privately owned scooter at a very high speed. We do need to work very closely with the state government, and I hope we can do that over the coming months. They also do set the penalties. They set the enforcement regime. And I think we could do more to ensure that the penalties are much more well known by users. I don't think it's easy to find out what the penalties are for not wearing a helmet, for having doubling and those sort of things. So I'd like to hope that we're doing a bit of that liaison. But I think I generally agree with the premise that footpaths are not the best location for two-wheeled vehicles, particularly when they're narrow. But I do think we've kind of technology and user behaviour and what consumers want is changing, and we have to catch up the infrastructure to that. And that means that we do need to upgrade separated cycleways. The bike riders have been asking for that for decades, and now it is clear that not only do the bike riders need them, but the scooter riders need them. So I think I know we've approved a trial of some in the CBD. I think that should be helpful when that happens. But, again, working with the state government, I think we need to really look at some of the key routes and ensure that there is a safe place for these vehicles on our roads, because they are vehicles and they would be better for everybody, for the riders as well as the pedestrians, if they were in their own space on our roads in a separated, safe place, not trying to mix the two-wheeled vehicles in with the four-wheeled vehicles. So, I hope we can advance that as well. But I think this is clearly now the trial is continuing, which is good. The staff's report and the motion sets out a bit of a work program of more research and more actions that need to take place. And so, I look forward to the trial continuing and the responsiveness of the staff and the companies to changes that clearly need to happen, do happen, and that we as policymakers also make the changes we need to make, which is things like making decisions about separated cycleways and getting them rolled out as well, and hopefully working with the state government on those too, because I think they can certainly help too. So I think that's all of my comments. Thank you, everyone.
Lord Mayor, if I can close debate.
That'd be great. Thanks,
Thank
Alderman
you.
Zucker.
Lord Mayor, thank you for that. Look, Councillor Dutta actually made a very, very interesting comment, a last comment about the danger of these scooters and whether it's the scooters and the riders. It is the riders, it is those people that use them, and that's what I said earlier tonight. Those are the idiots. And some of the idiots, as I said, are also parents who allow their children to be on those scooters holding a cup. You know, it's good to see that Councillor Dutta and his business is experiencing the same issues that a number of people are. But Lord Mayor, in respect to the state government, I understand that they may have legislated whatever they've legislated, but at the end of the day, they can put into legislation what the speed limits are going to be on XYZ and for private owned scooters. But insofar as this situation where we have a private company in which we're allowing to use the ratepayer infrastructure for the use of a business, we control the footpaths, we control the roadways, except for Davey Street and Macquarie Street. So, putting the onus on the state government is not the way. Yes, let's work with the state government. That's why part one is about Tasmania Police. So we make sure that Tasmania Police are involved and to assist in ensuring that we get the message out there, but we don't want idiots on our roads. I just want to sort of respond to a point made by the deputy in regards not to cut at the knees. There's no intention of cutting the knees here. The intent here is to, for especially the users, myself and Alderman Briscoe and others, is to send a message out there to everybody that and to understand the whole program. Like, I understand the CEO is getting on top of everything, but the public out there don't know what we're doing. And this is the thing that we need to ensure. And this is why I believe this motion is very important, that when the public read this motion, they will know that this is what the council is going to be doing to overcome some of the issues that have been raised. And as Alderman Councillor Dutta said, very, very serious issues. Lord Mayor, it looks like that there's going to be support for this, and I thank the councillors and aldermen for providing the support. Insofar as changing the motion, see, just like we have to listen to our ratepayers and residents, the original movers of the original motion have listened to a number of people and had discussions with a number of people, the operators as well, and their PR team, to ensure that we at least to our ratepayers and residents, we're sending a message that we are listening to them, just as we have, Jeff and I, Alderman Briscoe and I, have listened to everybody else, and I thank you all for your support.
Thank you. So I'll go around and just see how everyone would like to vote. Deputy Lord Mayor?
For.
Alderman Zuko?
For.
Alderman Briscoe?
For, of course.
Alderman Sexton?
For, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Thomas?
For.
Alderman Harvey? Oh, Councillor Harvey, sorry.
For.
Alderman Barakis?
For.
Councillor Dutta?
For.
Councillor Fox?
For.
Councillor Sherlock?
For.
Councillor Coates?
For, Lord Mayor.
And myself for, so that's passed unanimously. Okay, moving on now to item 13, which is another motion. I'll pass over to Deputy Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, I foreshadowed a...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. So foreshadowed motion by Councillor Harvey. I need a seconder. Councillor Sherlock.
Can we hear it again, please, Lord Mayor?
Certainly. That the council acknowledges the high user rate and popularity of e-scooters in Hobart. And part two, the council recognises the shortage of safe separated bike and scooter lanes and commits to accelerating development of infrastructure to create a safer environment for pedestrians, bike riders and scooter users.
So it's been seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Would anyone like to speak to that?
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I'd just like to ask a couple of questions. Would Alderman Harvey put them in two parts?
They are in two parts.
I
can move them in two parts. Okay.
Yeah. My second question is, with part 2 that a report be provided because it doesn't. It hasn't stated a report. He's saying we'll do it. I'd like to see a report, costings and everything like that. So would you use the word a report, come back to council?
Happy to include report. It shouldn't be too much anyway. We've got a lot of this stuff on the book. Yep.
So a report on the acceleration or whatever.
Yeah, no. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Good. Okay, I've got Alderman Jeff Briscoe. Alderman Briscoe, sorry. Hand up.
Thank you, Councillor Anna Reynolds. Look, yes, we've got to be very careful. We're not committing. We know these bike paths are very expensive, and I support increased bike paths around the city, shared bike paths. We have got a trial coming up in Campbell Street shortly, and that's probably going to cost the city $1 million. So accelerating bike paths is going to be a very expensive exercise, and it's pretty important that we have the full financial things on the table and we put them in the right place. Now, I think Alderman Zuko is suggesting a report come back to us with costings and how we're going to accelerate. I'll be supporting both parts of the motion. So the popularity of e-scooters, the key one is, I reckon, is the popularity of personal e-scooters. It is increasing. If it was only personal e-scooters, I don't think we would have the issues that we had in the previous motion. So we've got to be careful that, as we said in the previous motion, a lot of these e-scooter popularity is due to young people and people using them for fun things around the waterfront. And so we've got to be careful that we're not indicating that the popularity is just on people using it as a transport mode. It is often as a joyride. Thank you.
Alderman Thomas.
Yes, look, I'm supportive of both. But clearly, when we talk about prioritising and starting to upgrade processes, very much falls into Alderman Zuko's committee. I mean, we're still talking about upgrading and getting, what were the words used? Sorry, Councillor Harvey, prioritising. It's all a financial issue. Surely it's a budget. We certainly should have a report, but that report has to take into account the budgetary and financial implications, as opposed to what we have been doing is leaving them on a continuing watching brief.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I just get, so now that the part 2 has been amended, can I just get that read out in full again? Because it'll change whether or not will determine whether or not I support part 2 of this.
Can someone read that for me, please? Or for us, please?
I can read it. Part 2 is that council recognises the shortage of safe, separated bike and scooter lanes and commits to accelerating development of infrastructure to create a safer environment for pedestrians, bike riders and scooter users. And the report. Yeah.
So where does
following a report?
Yeah. So does the report come first, or does the commitment come first? Because this is an important distinction here.
Well,
report.
Honestly, folks, we really need to see how committed we are. And I've heard people say before that there's 4 bikes, but if we want to have this happen, we need to show that commitment. So the commitment, of course, will be aligned with a report and the finances of all this. But the scooters have caught us in a position which we didn't expect. I didn't think the uptake of scooters would be so huge. And now we don't have the infrastructure to accommodate it. So I think we need that commitment. So a commitment and a report, they're the same. They'll both happen at the same time, I hope.
Okay. Look, Lord Mayor, with that said, look, I think the report and a commitment are definitely not the same thing. I would be happy to support a report coming back to council, looking into, as was said earlier, the costs, the financial implications, the difference in demand for the different uses of infrastructure, because many of these separated bike paths will come at the cannibalizing of existing infrastructure. I won't be supportive. I think it's completely irresponsible for council to be making commitments to anything without having that information in front of us. We can't make the commitment and then get a report afterwards. It's the same thing as making a decision before you've done the homework. This is look, if we're going to get a report, you make the commitment after you've determined what comes out of the report. This is completely asked backwards, Lord Mayor. Look, I would support. I'll actually move an amendment that a report come back. Part 2 read that a report come back to council outlining the financial implications of further investment into separated bicycle paths, and then council can make an actual educated decision when the time's right, when we get that information. And I think it does also need to be said that, for all the talk that we just had in that last motion, this is a trial. We don't know for sure whether this will be a permanent program. Like I have high hopes for this once these issues are ironed out, but at the moment this is a trial, so we can't use 1 month's worth of data from a trial to determine long-term future infrastructure, and we can't use it as a wedge to put in things that we would like to see, all else being held equal. So look, I'd support getting a report on this, and if it's the logical, sensible thing to do to have this further investment, then sure. But I'm not doing it on the back of 1 month worth of data, and I'm definitely not comfortable in making a commitment before we've had a report that we're looking at getting anyway. So I'd move an amendment that we get that report first, and then we can talk about commitments.
Sorry, I'm a little bit unsure now whether is that an additional point 3? Is that a
no, replacing part 2?
Okay,
the report
that might be a foreshadowed, I think.
May I assist, Lord Mayor?
What was
Can
that?
I just add something, Lord Mayor? Oh, sorry.
May I assist? I was going to say.
No, I do have.
Okay, all right, I'll go back to sleep.
Look, if that's the case, Lord Mayor, I'll move it I'll move it as a foreshadowed. I'll be voting against it.
Okay. Deputy Lord Mayor.
I think Councillor Sherlock wants to say something, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, I'm just following the order of hands, sorry. Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Just to take on board what Alderman Barakis was saying, it might just be, the best thing might be just to put commits to a report. That takes care of all of what everyone wants to do, and where we all are achieving our same goal.
I'd happily commit to a report.
Yeah.
So I think Alderman, Councillor Harvey, maybe you need to think about how you put the word report into your part 2. But for now I'll hear from Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think from the previous conversation, we've been looking at safety first and foremost, and it's on everybody's minds that we need a safe operating environment. Now, I talked about hyperbole with some of the examples that I'd been provided. Having said that, if we're really serious about making things safe, we look and we don't hold back on getting separated bike lanes, which include for e-scooters. It's just, like this is a commitment that Councillor Harvey is suggesting, and it kind of makes or breaks it for me. Are we really committed to safety, or is it that we don't like bike infrastructure? Because that's sometimes how it's worked. Now, just
point of order, Lord Mayor. That's complete to imply that anyone that doesn't support this isn't committed to safety. I think it's just a completely low blow. It's completely inappropriate.
Okay, thanks, Alderman Brooks. I don't think it's sort of it's the deputy's opinion, and we've had this before. I don't think it's her opinion. She's not. She's making a general observation on policy, not on people's personalities or whatever. So I won't uphold that point of order.
And just to finish, Lord Mayor, it was raised about the trials that are going ahead, separated bike lanes, I think mainly in Campbell and Argyle streets. And fortunately, the state government has come good on providing most of the money relating to that. So fortunately, the state government sees the benefit for safety in relation to having a trial for separated cycleways.
Alderman Zuko.
Yeah, Lord Mayor. Look, I was going to mention it before about endeavouring to resolve and hopefully get Alderman Barakis on side with the motion. And this is only to part 2. And that's why I was asking Alderman Harvey in regards to a report. I understand what Alderman Harvey is seeking is a commitment from us that we will go down this track. But as we normally do, we need a report so we know what's involved in it. I'm happy and I would support a commitment in principle for what Harvey wants to, Councillor Harvey wants to bring, and all the words that Alderman Harvey's using, subject to the report. Because I'm happy to commit to it in principle, but what if, and I actually agree with the deputy, because the state governments come into the play in providing funding. There could be federal government funding. There could be other things there. So to my point of view, the report will provide us with a lot of answers that we're going to seek. And that's basically what Councillor Dutta was saying as well. We need to make sure that if we're going to get the information back, let's get all the information. So I do ask, and I'd hopefully Alderman Barakis might get on board, if it's a commitment in principle, all the other parts of the motion subject to a report. So then we know exactly what we are committing to. Because if you're committing to something, you're only committing to the words of it, because we don't know what the end result is. That's all I'm trying to get at. And that's my suggestion to Alderman Harvey.
Can I respond?
Yes, Councillor Harvey.
Okay, so how's this? The council recognises the shortage of safe, separated bike and scooter lanes. All good? And commits to a report to accelerating development of infrastructure to create a safer environment for pedestrians, bike riders and scooter users. We already have lots of reports, but what I'm calling for here is how do we take all those reports and look at how we can create another report to accelerate the rolling out of all those projects that we would like to do. Does that satisfy you, Alderman Barakis and Alderman Zuko? I'll read it again.
Slower.
Okay. That council recognises the shortage of safe and separated bike and scooter lanes. Cool. And commits to a report to accelerating development of infrastructure to create a safer environment for pedestrians, bike riders and scooter users. There you go.
Okay. Is the seconder happy with that? Oh, sorry. Seconder's happy with that. Okay, if there's no further discussion, I will put that. I'll go around and see how you vote. Deputy Lord Mayor.
What?
Sorry, Lord Mayor, we're doing it in 2 parts.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, Alderman Zuko requested we do it in 2 parts. Right, we would like his support, so thank you.
Okay, so the first part was around the acknowledgement of the high use so far. Is there anyone who'd like to dissent against that?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Zuko?
Yep.
Okay, no other dissent? All right, so that one's passed 11-1, I think. Okay, item 2 that Councillor Harvey's just read out about the separated cycleways and the further report on that. Would anyone like to dissent against that?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Any other dissent? Okay, so that one's carried also 11 votes to 1. Okay, thank you, everyone. We will now move on to a second motion on our agenda, which is item 13. I'll pass over to Deputy Lord Mayor, who's the mover of this motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So the motion is fairly straightforward and has remained unchanged from the motion that was sent out with the original agenda. So I'll move that.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you. And Lord Mayor, this is in 3 parts. It's really, and the 3 parts are one after the other, essentially. So the first part is about the council advocate for refugees and asylum seekers who have been brought to onshore detention through the medical evacuation, and in particular those currently held, about 30 currently held at the Park Hotel, which is really for an indefinite period. You might remember that the Park Hotel was where world tennis #1 Novak Djokovic was detained when there were problems with his visa. And what we saw was he was detained with the refugees who'd been there for a couple of years, detained in the Park Hotel, which is a hotel. It's not actually a detention centre, but they've been locked in their rooms, and it's not been great, unfortunately, for them. The second part is about authorising the Lord Mayor to write to the minister responsible and asking that he requesting urgently that there is humanitarian settlement for these men who seek sanctuary and a safe home in Australia. And the third part, so given that the Minister, Alex Hawke, could use his special powers, so the special ministerial powers, which we saw kick in for the consideration of Novak Djokovic's visa and how that unfolded. But the last part is, given that we're a refugee welcome zone, we welcome refugees and diversity in our city, and we have a strong history of that. That we work with stakeholders such as the MRC, with Catholic Care and various stakeholders who are responsible in resettling. These resettlement settlement programs have been in place for many years, and Hobart, along with our other surrounding municipalities, have been involved with settling refugees. And we can go back 10 years. The Kosovar refugees were settled in Tasmania. The Syrian refugees in 2015, and so we have been very much a welcoming city. So I believe that there is a large amount of support. I was approached by a group called the Tassie Nanas, who have been advocating one stitch at a time for the release from detention for many people who have been in overseas detention, and now the Medivac refugees. And so I ask that the council consider this with compassion, and that we recognise we represent the concerns that have been raised by our constituents. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman Sexton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to ask if the Deputy Lord Mayor would consider her motion to allow her motion to be considered separately, parts 1, 2, and 3, and I'll explain why. I, like many people, have a great deal of sympathy and empathy for the refugees that are in Australia generally, and in particular, having seen the plight of those in the Park Hotel and listened to some of them, I have a great deal of concern for them. So I would certainly support parts 1 and part 2. Part 3 I have a lot of difficulty with, not so much because I don't wish to welcome refugees into the city, but I just simply think we do not have the infrastructure to be able to support them. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that as a general practitioner, every week I have to sit down with patients of mine who have mental health and physical health issues and help them fill out forms for housing. They are on a waiting list which is thousands long. They bring in these forms to me to help in the hope that that will get them up the ranking, the listing a little bit faster. Some of them have already been waiting 2 years. There are thousands on the waiting list for housing. The only way we could genuinely welcome the refugees into our city would be if we could guarantee that they got priority housing. We could not bring them down here if we couldn't do that. And I'm afraid I can't at this point in time, given the dire housing situation for the people who are currently in Tasmania, I can't support any process which would prioritise people other than those that are already on the waiting list. As I said, many of whom have serious mental health and physical health issues. So as much if we had a better housing situation down here, if the government had done what it should have done years ago and built houses for those people who are always going to need them, then I would support all three parts. But I cannot support part 3 for the reasons that I've explained, but I would be perfectly happy to support parts 1 and part 2 if they were taken separately.
Lord Mayor, could I just respond to to clarify something, if I may? So there is a humanitarian settlement program which is provided by, at the moment, it's the Migrant Resource Centre. So they are tasked with settling refugees who have been sent as part of that humanitarian settlement program. So there are actually there is specific housing involved. So I know that there would be concerns, and certainly it's been raised with me, concerns around housing availability, which is obviously abysmal. But that, I think, is taken out of the equation because of the stakeholders such as the MRC who have that as their task.
Next speaker is Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I would like to start by commending the Deputy Lord Mayor for bringing this to Council, and also to the knitting nanas who have been highlighting the plight of refugees in the Elizabeth Street Mall for quite a number of years now in a gentle, persuasive way. I think we all understand the issues with refugees, the implications for Tasmania, as Councillor Sexton has raised, I think has been answered by the Deputy Lord Mayor in that there are programs. But I think on the back of our good record when it comes to advocating for refugees, I think we should all support this notice of motion. So thank you and well done, Deputy.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'm not sure where to begin with this one. I appreciate the sentiment of where the Deputy Lord Mayor has come from in moving this motion. I guess I could speak to what local government should and shouldn't do. I guess I could speak to the capacity of Hobart to house or not these people. But I think what I'll probably speak to is a bit of a personal anecdote. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Lebanon in 2016 and go to World Vision House. And I saw the refugee camps that were there at the time with people displaced from Syria. And there are millions. There are lots. There is a huge, huge, huge demand for people to come to Hobart, to Australia, to the Western world, and ultimately make a better lives for themselves. And every person I spoke to, you know, when you say you're Australian, they just go, "Oh my gosh, how can I get there? You know, I'd love to be there." And you know, it's really confronting. But we have, as a country, a very strong policy that we will run a very compassionate and a very fulsome immigration and support UNHCR and support the right of refugees, and that's what we do. What we don't do, however, is provide to anyone who just sort of arrives. And it might be horrible, it might be tough, but the reason that these people were in offshore detention is because ultimately they didn't come via the acceptable means. And, you know, we've seen it. We saw it I think it was CF 22, you know, in 2010 at Christmas Island when, you know, 50 people died. They died. And, you know, this policy wasn't put in place just for the fun of it. And, you know, any sort of workaround or individual sort of, you know, action ultimately undermines what is a policy decision that's been made by us as a country. And look, I have every sympathy for people who find themselves in these horrible situations. But ultimately, in this area of policy, it's something that needs to be done at a fulsome level in an appropriate way. And that's what ultimately the federal government's there for to do. And by and large, governments of both persuasions, Australia as a country over many, many decades now has been at the absolute forefront. And we should hold our heads high. And the City of Hobart should hold its head high because we do our bit too. But ultimately, this policy and what we're being asked to vote on today undermines that. I do think it might be a very good short-term win, but ultimately it'll lead to worse outcomes down the track. We've seen it before, and my fear is we'll see it again. So look, I cannot support this policy. I appreciate the sentiments of where the Deputy Mayor is coming from, but ultimately we should be doing everything we can to support the current actions and the current administration of our refugee system, because Australia is, if not the world leader, one of the world leaders in this area. But we shouldn't be undermining ultimately what is a deterrent system to stop people coming in via the inappropriate means, as opposed to coming in via the UNHCR. Thanks.
Alderman Thomas.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Look, I acknowledge just what Councillor Coates just mentioned. And yes, I acknowledge, as one follower of the Djokovic saga for days, I upset my family by watching the live cast from the federal court. So obviously I need a life, but nevertheless, what we haven't done here, it's fine for a country to set out and set in place an immigration policy and to provide with the citizens' approval conditions under which people can come to this country. But tell me where, any member of this council, where we can stand by and watch for years and years these people at the Park Hotel. For years this has taken. Our legal system showed how quickly it responded to Djokovic. It showed how quickly justice was meted out in that case because people had the money or because it had the notoriety. But I, as a former ombudsman in the state, can't stand by. And whilst I totally accept that the boundaries of what local government deals with has moved and moved over a period of time, since this was announced as a motion, it's in tonight's SBS News. So already, despite whether or not a Lord Mayor's letter goes out, it's already getting national press coverage. And we as a nation should hang our heads in shame, and as a level of government, we should be very mindful of the impact on the lives of these people, who many of whom have done more than a life sentence. Many of them have done more than a prison will put you in for murder. And whether or not they came here illegally, we are unable, we cannot support the inefficient nature of the way we're processing these cases. I accept totally. And in some cases, going back through the history, going back through the country in-country records of the circumstances under which these people are claiming refugee status, it doesn't matter. 8, 9, 10, 12 years is a disgrace, and none of us should stand by. And I hate moving local government away from so many of the areas it needs to concentrate on. But Deputy Lord Mayor, I strongly support it. If anything can be done to make the Park Hotel a hotel for travellers rather than a hotel for people to be locked up for years and years of their life, let's do it.
Sorry, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, like Councillor Coates, I've had personal experience here. I looked after in my home an asylum seeker who was lucky to get on a boat just before everyone was sent to Manus Island. But his brother and wife and child got sent to Manus Island. I looked after that young fella for over a year. I personally contacted senators, including Senator Abet's office, and we managed, well, Senator Abetz managed to get the brother and the wife and quite an ill child off Manus Island. So we can't say that people have no sympathy and aren't doing the right thing. There's plenty of, and I must admit, Senator Brown as well was very helpful for this. It was only a couple of years ago. All I can say is, why pick on 30? There's more in detention for long periods of time. And I would say, whilst we could, if the Lord Mayor does get to write that letter, we could mention them specifically, but mention other people who've been in long-term detention. And I agree with what just Alderman Thomas said. It is a disgrace for a country like Australia to keep people essentially in prison for longer than a lot of people who do serious crimes in Australia stay in prison. So I'm sort of ashamed of Australia with that. I do believe, though, as Councillor Coates said, we have to have an orderly system of refugees. And during the last time we took, before COVID, I think about 13,000 refugees, which went through a system. And I've taught a lot of those in the state system and also in the Catholic system, who the kids of these asylum seekers. And they contribute to Australia in a significant way. However, I don't believe that we should say that these 30 people, if we have any influence at all, should come to Hobart. There are plenty of places in Australia where there is housing, and not in a capital city, which now has got the highest rent of any capital city. And are we putting, situation is that we're putting these refugees, if they too turn up in Tasmania, in an untenable position. Even though there are programs trying to house them, there are plenty of Tasmanians in these housing as well. So if the Deputy could consider just modifying her motion slightly to use the 30 that are stuck in this hotel for at least 2 years and longer in detention as an example, rather than asking particularly for these 30 people. And I wonder, the first question, could I just ask that to the Deputy?
Deputy?
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe, for that concern. I mean, this was specifically raised with me with people who obviously care about all of the people in detention. And I might say that some of these medevaced people in detention, some of them are actually genuine refugees, and they still aren't changing, like they still have their cases stalled. So I'd actually like just to maintain it as this 30, because it's representative of what was brought to me.
Yeah. Okay. The second question, if I could ask you through the Lord Mayor, is that the senators for Tasmania, which is all colours, perhaps we should write to them as well, because from my personal experience, which I revealed a moment ago, and a couple of other experiences, they have significant impact. Writing to the Minister for Immigration, he'll look at it and put it aside and send a nice acknowledgement back. But if we sent a letter to all senators and all members of Parliament for Tasmania, federal Parliament, because that's their, and get their commitment too. Probably Andrew Wilkie, member for Clark, is probably on it already, and some of the other ones as well. But I can say just sending a letter directly just to the Minister of Immigration will have no impact, except as Alderman Thomas said, just a little bit of a headline somewhere in the media.
I'm more than happy to accept that suggestion to write to the senators, and if not just Andrew Wilkie, all of the House of Representatives members of in Tasmania.
Thank you. And the third one, I wonder, seeing I'm going well with changes, thank you very much, Deputy. I wonder if we could, rather than settle in Hobart, or put after Hobart, or in a equally welcoming city or town in Australia. Because I think we've got to accept the fact we are welcoming to refugees, but I think there are other places where the housing crisis is not as bad as it is in Hobart.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I just think that will probably change the tenor of what the Tassie Nanas have instructed me to do. So, like it doesn't. Yeah. So I think it would be better just to leave that part 3 as it is.
Okay. Sadly, I'll have to vote against part 3, but thank you for including those other comments. Thank you.
Okay, I think next speaker is Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll start with a question to whoever is best to answer it. It might be the Deputy herself. Just a quick Google search has shown that the City of Melbourne's a refugee welcome zone. So I'm just wondering as to what justification is of calling for these individuals to come to Hobart.
Thank you for the question, Alderman Barak. Through you, Lord Mayor. This was specifically asked for by a group as who I've referred to already, and their concern is, and they feel that there is a strong enough network in Hobart and Greater Hobart in relation to this.
Right. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've had, I'm sure we've all received emails, the same emails in regards to this issue. And I've seen some of the discussion on this in the public, and a lot of it outside those that have taken the form of sort of campaign emails to our inbox have all touched on the same thing. And it's the same question I have to ask when looking at part 3 of this motion. Everybody on this council is on a unity ticket here that we agree that we've got some serious issues of housing affordability in this city. And I know the Deputy Lord Mayor did touch on this earlier, but we've got no advice on what the capacity for the Migrant Resource Centre is as far as what their existing stock are and whether they're able to house these individuals on the spot. We have some pretty significant challenges as far as housing the people that already live here. Given that the city that these, in Melbourne, that these people are, is also a refugee welcome zone. It seems really counterproductive to call for bringing them here. And just I think that does also speak to, and I might just reflect here on the broader motion. And I think that Alderman Thomas inadvertently touched on, I think, what the key point is here, is that this motion is likely going to get quite a lot, and it already has, as Alderman Thomas has said, a lot of media attention. I think that ultimately is what the intent is here. We have, once again, motions coming up on issues in which this council has no business interjecting themselves into. I'm not even going to touch on the pros and cons on the issue. I think Councillor Coates made those points eloquently enough. But once again, we've had motions on pill testing. We've had motions on nuclear disarmament. These aren't the issues that we paid to debate. These aren't the issues that we paid to address. These aren't the issues that we were elected by the public and the ratepayers and residents of Hobart to get into.
It actually is completely our job to make decisions.
Sorry, Councillor Fox.
Thank you.
Councillor Fox, you need to make that as part of your own intervention, I think.
Okay, cool. Well, I just object to that statement by Alderman Barakis because I couldn't disagree more, and it actually says in
okay, Councillor Fox, it'd be lovely if you made that contribution as part of your own thing, but it's not a point of order, really.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, if I might continue. Look, it does seem very, very convenient that I've got a motion that looks like it was almost written word for word off the back of a Facebook post and media from Senator Nick McKim in the lead up to a federal election. It's campaigning through the chamber of the council, as far as I can see it, and take that as a personal reflection. But I don't think this is an appropriate use of council time, no matter how one interprets the Local Government Act. And I think that we can do better than that. And I think that, this is an issue that members of this council feel strongly about. They're welcome to use their position or their platform as councillors to make those statements and make their views known on that outside of the chamber when they're not doing the job as wardens of the ratepayers' resources in the city. But look, I just think that Part 1 and 2 are effectively completely outside the remit of the council. Part 3 is, I think, completely irresponsible to be calling for to bring a large group of people here to a city that is struggling to house those that are already here. I think it's poorly thought out. I think it's something that's put forward simply for the sake of, as Alderman Thomas said, and I know that wasn't his intent, but I think he did hit the nail on the head. It's a media grab to help with some talking points for some other members of the same party. So I won't be supporting this, and I don't think it's appropriate in any way, shape or form.
Okay, further discussion, Councillor Fox?
Yeah, sure. I think everybody would know my stance on this particular issue. I think, yeah, as I've already said, it is our job to debate and discuss these issues as representatives of our community, especially in the lack of action from other levels of government whose responsibility it is to actually do these things. And I think it's pretty clear that most of us around the table at least very strongly disagree with the federal government stance on and treatment of people seeking asylum. And yeah, thanks for bringing the motion, Helen. And yeah, Simon, if you could stop telling me how to do my job, that would be fantastic. Maybe read the Local Government Act sometime.
Okay, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's been very interesting discussion, and I would just want to reflect on a number of points that has been made. Firstly, I also want to join the others and commend the Deputy Lord Mayor for bringing this in. Thank you very much, and it's high time. And secondly, I also want to note here the Tassie Nanas. And in that context, let me refer the elected members to the Local Government Act. Section 20 states very clearly that council has following functions: A, to provide for the health, safety and welfare of the community; 2, to represent and promote the interest of the community. No doubt you will all agree that in the previous motion, we all supported it unanimously because it was the community interest, and we took that on board. Here, I see no reason as to why the deputy cannot bring this to us. She is bringing to us the interest of the community to represent and promote what they want to. Section 28 also states very clearly with regards to functions of the councillors. A, it says to represent the community, and B, to act in the best interests of the community. Now, it is absolutely clear that this council or councils in Tasmania don't simply restrictively put themselves in a box of rates, roads, and rubbish. That is not our role or functions, because it is very clear in the Act. So it is quite in order for the Deputy Mayor to bring this to us. The second observation I make here is that Alderman Thomas has made a brilliant point, and I would want to support that. I too believe that it is a disgrace, it is deplorable, and it is disappointing. And few of us who have been isolated, and we have been put in the same situation as if we were detained in our own homes for 7 days or 10 days, how difficult that was, psychologically, emotionally, and even physically. Just imagine these people who are in there for so many years, and statements have already been made that some of them wouldn't get that sort of imprisonment if they committed a crime. The third observation I make here is with regards to the issues that was stated. It is not a crime under the Australian law to arrive here by the boat without a valid visa and ask for protection. It is not a crime. All people who arrive here by boat without a valid visa are subject to mandatory detention and protection. That is the law. The international law gives us that providence very, very clearly. I would refer also to the United Nations Convention on Human Rights. It very clearly in Article 26 and 31, it states it is the freedom of movement that these people are restricted. And it's time that we take that on board. Article 15 states that the freedom of association has been denied, and we need to address this. And these are enshrined in the international human rights treaties. And it is their right to seek asylum because they are running away from things. Worldwide, in 2019 and 20, there were 26 million refugees. And out of that, about 15,000 were flee and came here to Australia. And we are so proud of that. in the beginning, the first settlers came in and they invaded the place. There are people who are running away because of their lives. Let us show compassion and do something for them. I would support all three parts of it. Thank you.
Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I just would like to start by saying thank you very much to Councillor Burnett for bringing this particular motion. I do commend it as well. And also to Tassie Nanas or Knitting Nanas also for advocating tirelessly for the refugees and asylum seekers. Really commendable work that they do. Perhaps I'll just start with a particular question that might be directed to one of the officers, or perhaps it may be best directed at Alderman Barakas, considering Section 20 and Section 28 of the Act. I was just wondering, is it correct then that this particular issue is not within the scope of what councillors can actually vote on, or within the scope of council's roles and responsibilities as elected members?
Is that a question for the CEO?
Perhaps Alderman Barakas might want to answer that, seeing as he made the comment. More than happy for him to defer to the CEO if he cannot answer it.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I think I've repeatedly on numerous occasions made my views on my interpretation of that section of the Act and the appropriate and the what's appropriate to be debated and discussed in council, but happy to defer to the CEO.
CEO.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sherlock, for the question. Look, there's nothing at all that restricts council members from introducing these sorts of matters into the council chamber. In fact, we do see this happening in many other councils across the country, and indeed capital cities, where elected members do take an interest in matters that are national and international in nature, particularly around social policy. Lord Mayor, thank you.
Thank you very much, CEO. I would then, I suppose, like to make the comment that a retort to Alderman Barakas's comment that this is, in fact, not irresponsible in any way to bring this particular motion. My next question is probably directed then at Councillor Burnett, just with regards to the comments that you made regarding the MRC having the capacity to house the individuals within the motion. And Alderman Barakas raised the idea that perhaps there wasn't any evidence to suggest that the MRC could potentially house these individuals. Do you have any further comments on that, Councillor Burnett?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Lord Mayor. I have spoken to the CEO of the MRC. I was also on the board of the MRC for many years, and they do have the humanitarian settlement program, which is about housing those new arrivals, and that is what they do, and they have the mechanisms in place to do that. And let me add that there are other people involved in the network of support for refugees as well.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. So then would it be a fair assumption then to make that going on from what Alderman Barakas and Alderman Sexton and Councillor Coates said, they're two different stocks that we're talking about in terms of housing. Is that a correct assertion?
That's right.
Great, thank you very much for that. So I think that probably covers the dilemma that many may potentially be having, that we don't actually have the housing stock here in Hobart, particularly considering our housing issues. They're two completely different stocks. They're two completely different stakeholders actually advocating and providing housing for migrants and refugees, especially those on humanitarian visas, as opposed to the locals who are on the list and those types of housing plans that should actually be provided for by the state government. So I think that's a really, really important point that we must consider and that we must actually take account of before you vote for number 3, because if you're voting on the premise that you don't want to have individuals coming into the state because they'll become more of a burden on our system, that's not actually a valid argument. It's an invalid argument, actually, because they're two completely different pools of housing. Once again, thank you very much for raising this issue, and I do support it wholeheartedly.
Alderman Zuko.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I also like to commend the Deputy Lord Mayor for raising this issue. I think it's a very, very important issue to raise. I know there's been argument about the relevant sections of the Act about what our roles and responsibilities are. Of course, any elected member can come forward with motions or anything they want to pursue for members of the community, as Councillor Dutt has said. Yes, we are here to represent the community. But does that mean that anything that the community brings forward to each individual elected member, we have to simply just go ahead and believe that that's what the ratepayers and the residents of Hobart are seeking? I'm not quite sure on that, because I don't know that yet. The emails that I've received thus far have been generated by a small group of people, and I've also had some emails in the contrary. So in my dilemma, one has to sort of weigh up, is this something that the ratepayers of Hobart should be undertaking, especially where there could be other places where they may be far better suited to go to, especially like we do have a very shortage of people of workforces in a lot of regional areas and a lot of farm areas across our country. Now, I got no problem about assisting those people that are here, but why is it that Hobart City Council is the one that has to jump on board what I more consider is a federal and or potential state government matter? Why is it that we as a council, which, and I'm going to talk politics now, when there is an issue that is extremely left-wing and a Greens policy, has to be brought to the table of the Hobart City Council? You know, this is what is concerning me with this motion here. Yes, there may have been some people and members of the community that may have discussed it with other people, and if in case our Senator Nick McKim had it on his Facebook page, that even further enhances my concerns. Now, in regards to the discussion about whether or not we have the availability of housing, look, that might be from a different pool, but is that housing available or not available? At the end of the day, it really isn't our business. It is, we can advocate, we can do the things that we want to do. I really can't see the problem with part one. I do see a problem with part two, because I believe that, and even writing to our senators, I believe we're getting in the political sphere, especially coming up with a federal election. And I really believe that our ratepayers should not be having to be subjected to this council going down the track of debating and discussing matters which are more so in the federal political domain. So I will only support part one, because I think it's great to advocate that, and I think each individual elected member has the right to advocate and do what they want. And that way there, I'll support that, but I can't support the other two at all whatsoever, because I believe my role as an elected member is to take the concerns of the majority of ratepayers of Hobart, not a group that could be considered political.
I've got two hands up. It looks like we've got three questions because everyone's spoken. So I've got Alderman Sexton.
Yes, I have a point of clarification, Lord Mayor. Government website Humanitarian Settlement Program and Housing Connect. MRC TAS provides housing to newly arrived Humanitarian Settlement Program clients free of charge for the first 28 days. MRC TAS leases up to 34 properties from Housing Tasmania in Hobart and Launceston for this purpose. MRC TAS will also sort private properties and hotels for the 28-day period if the number of newly arrived entrants exceeds the accommodation capacity. After this initial rent-free period, clients sign an accommodation lease and become rent-paying tenants. This housing is temporary and provides people with time to find and establish alternative housing. In order to find and establish alternative housing, they are directed to Housing Connect, which is where all Tasmanians have to go for permanent housing, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Sexton. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord. I was going to touch on the same thing, and it actually raises more questions because I don't think the previous answer did much to answer it at all.
Sorry, Alderman Barakis, because you've spoken, there either needs to be a very brief point of clarification, which is about something you've said, or a question to someone else.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just jumping off from what Alderman Sexton said, if these are for temporary, if the humanitarian settle program is for settlement support from 12 to 18 months, what happens? And it's for 34 properties. So what is the current capacity? Are they tenanted currently? Are they all available? And what happens to these people once that 12 months is out? Do they then go back onto the general housing pool? And it also says here that they're permanent residents, so these people even be eligible. So there's three questions.
That question to Deputy Lord Mayor?
To whoever can answer it, Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, I can't answer that because, as I said, this is very sequential we're going down areas where we'll be working with stakeholders. So we're not expected to answer that. That's what we do with stakeholders and those as part of the network.
Well, look, I'm not sure.
Sorry,
I'm not sure
Alderman Barakis, I'm sorry. It's I do need to pull this up in terms of just either questions and just answers at this stage. Councillor Dutta, have you got a question or a point of clarification?
Just a question with regards to the Tassie nanas. Are they the ratepayers of Hobart or are they from somewhere else?
Point of clarification. Sorry, that's a question I think to Deputy Lord Mayor.
So there are a mix. So they're not all from Hobart, but a vast majority of them are. So so I have been speaking to ratepayers.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. Further discussion? No further discussion. I might just say a few points. I think I just wanted to reflect on, I think I went through a similar experience that Alderman Thomas did in, I guess, being shocked back into some awareness about this particular situation through the publicity that was received around Djokovic and the hotel. I worked in this space for many years, but like a lot of people, I think we have forgotten some of the mess and the unorderly system that we're currently the country is currently sort of witness to. And I was pretty shocked actually. Some of the videos that were made public about those young men that arrived in their mid to late teens and are there in their mid to late 20s, still in detention. A lot of them have been proven to be genuine refugees, and the system has just not sorted out a solution, and that is a failure. That is clearly a failure. That something should be. Somebody needs to step up and get that sorted out. And yes, I appreciate there's also some other folks on Manus, is it, that are similar, that a larger number, but in a similar sort of challenge. But it is very, very disturbing, and it was it was a shock to be reminded of how long people have been in that hotel for in those conditions. It just is, it is pretty ridiculous. And you couldn't describe that as an orderly or well-managed immigration or refugee management system by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I do consider these kind of offers as a circuit breaker. Doesn't mean that we're the only people who are going to put an offer on the table. I think at a certain point in time, New Zealand provided a circuit breaker for Australia. The US has provided a circuit breaker for Australia. I mean, I know we're a city, but it is about saying, you know, we as a city are willing to assist in this process, and we think, you know, the right thing to do is to sort this out. On the question of housing and whether we've got sufficient housing for these particular folks, these 30 folks, I mean, I think we certainly have housing policy challenges. We have a need for more affordable housing, in particular in Hobart, but all sorts of housing right throughout Hobart and, in fact, Tasmania, and many cities are suffering from a similar challenge at the moment. Our housing system is very, you know, badly managed at the moment, particularly with the way that property speculation is making so much housing unaffordable. But I think to basically say we can't do this because we can't accommodate 30 people is a bit like saying we can't accept any migrants or any any internal migration into Hobart, and we won't do anything to promote this city as a great place to work or a great place to migrate to, or a great place to come and study. You know, we're not going to do that because we do want the city to be growing, and so I think to pick on these folks and say, well, we can't be welcoming because, you know, there isn't sufficient houses, we may as well say that to professional people wanting to come here or other migrants, and when we wouldn't want to do that. So I will support the motion, and I think it is a motion that a lot of people in Hobart and a sentiment a lot of people in Hobart, not everybody, not necessarily 100%, but I do think there is a strong sentiment of support for these kind of issues in the city of Hobart. Thank you. Deputy, did you want to sum up?
Oh, just briefly, I think there's some really strong points, and I appreciate those who have wholeheartedly supported this motion. I think it shows us as a compassionate city. We are concerned to the very core of our being in relation to the well-being of people who have been forgotten, unfortunately. And what our city can do in the event that the minister does see the benefit to not having them in detention, but having them settled and contributing as part of our community. I think there's real benefit to be gained, of course, from our city in general, and they're not necessarily restrained by a municipal border when they arrive. It's about working with other stakeholders, wherever that might be, wherever the need might be in country Tasmania or whatever. And we're doing this, I believe, because we are leaders. Sometimes it takes a little local government to do this. This is, we might say that our COVID responses in support of businesses and in support of those performing artists and other artists was not necessary, but we did it. So it wasn't part of our general, what we need to do as people in local government. I mean, I've been in local government for 17 years. We've done a lot that isn't just roads.
I can't hear a deputy anymore. I'm not sure if anyone else.
Yeah, Deputy, I think we might have lost your connection.
We have a free shot.
Okay, I think Deputy, there she is. Would you like, have you finished, Deputy? We missed your last bit, but I think you froze, but if you're happy, we'll get moving and vote on this now.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm putting these separately. Item 1, who would like to vote against? Was anyone like to vote against item 1? So I've got 2 hands. Just let me check that that's correct. That is Alderman Barakis and Councillor Coates. No other against for item 1. Okay, has that been recorded? Thank you. Item 2, anyone in dissent of item 2? I've got 3. It looks as though I've got Alderman Barakis, Councillor Coates and Alderman Zuko. Please call out if I've got anyone else, if I missed anyone else. And item 3, anyone who'd like to vote against that. So I've got Alderman Barakis, Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Coates, Alderman Zuko and Alderman Sexton. Okay, so those are recorded. So I think that means that all of those, all parts of that motion have passed, but with different numbers of people, which will be recorded in the minutes by Mr. Jackson, I'm sure.
Through you, Lord Mayor. Yes, that's correct.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, item 14 is to receive and note a professional development plan, moved by Councillor Fox, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. Any dissent to receiving and noting that? There being none, we're going to move, I'll ask for a motion to move into closed. Would someone like to move that? Moved by Deputy, seconded by Councillor Harvey. All those, any dissent for moving into closed? There's no dissent, so I will say good night to anyone who's watching and we'll move into closed.